Previously on Grapple Patreon.
Violent JP, you be right itself, doesn't it?
Oh, it's like that. And then they're like, it's almost like, you know what they're like? Every now and it's like they have got good songs, I'll say, ICP music-wise, but it's almost like they just stumble upon them. Like, it'll be like 20 songs of absolute shite.
I was about to say that.
Somehow, like, I don't know, fucking Miracles comes out.
The Interrogator? Come on, mate. Come
on. Fucking hell, yeah.
You're not going to do a giant silver in MMA?
Oh, he's been round the block, JP. He's been in some promotions, Giant Silver, hasn't he?
Mate, I'm just reading it. Giant Silver was in a G1.
That's what Matthew wants.
2001. Fourth place, short of blocks. Different time, I tell you. It's not.
Him or evil, come on.
Giant Silver every day of the week and twice on Sundays. At least he's tall.
I became friends with Mick Foley because they felt so guilty when they met him in WWF that they gave him a load of cash. Like,
that's an easy way to get into Foley, to be fair, like, isn't it?
Well, yeah, to be fair, yeah.
And the Kiss bloke's real skill is actually teaching us how to play baseball. All of that.
Proper though, JP.
Oh, Dale.
Well for himself, didn't he, Dale? He done well,
Mate, the last match they had apparently was at JCW Bloody Mania 3. And some of the matches on here are incredible. Like, the first match, Madman Pondo defeats Heidenreich. Here's the shocker: 19 minutes 38 seconds. Then you've got the JCW Tag Team title match with Billy Bong and the Weed Man, which feels like names I'd make up, defeating the Iron Saints. And then in the main event, which is apparently the last match on Cage Match that ICP have been in, we have a 10-man tag team match of Corporal Robinson, who's very much one of their guys, the ICP, Scott Hall and Sid Vicious defeating the Young Altar Boys of Terry, Tim, Todd and Tom, which I think is a funny name and worth revisiting at some stage. And Trent Acid, 26
the Young
minutes.
Bucks were up to.
Exactly.
26 minutes? 26 minutes, you say?
How much of that is Trent Acid setting up a spot?
I was going to say, JP, how many chokeslams and powerbombs Sid's hitting, though? That's all he's doing in that. I want to see
every one of those Young Altar Boys are just taking powerbomb after powerbomb and chokeslams all day long. That's why they're there.
Hello, and welcome to Spotlight here on Grapple Patreon. I'm Benno.
And I'm JP.
And joining us, I had an intro set up there, I was going to say, you know, of WrestlePurists fame, of Joe Hulbert promotions. I don't know, maybe I should introduce the Billy Bong and the Weed Man show with JP and Joe Hulbert. Yeah, didn't even set that up on purpose, Joe, but kind of fits them. It's good to have you on.
It's great to be on. I'm doing guest spots, and absolutely no one knows how to intro me. They're like, "Are you wrestle? You are, right?
Free agent
still? Like, it's a mess, dude. I don't know. I'm around though. I'm here now. This is fun. Very, very fun. I'm thrilled to be here. I'm actually a fan of the show, and I think Benno knows me well enough to know that there's not many wrestling pods that I can say that about sincerely. Like, it's just. When you do a lot of it, it's hard, right? But I have a lot of fun listening in, so much so that when I was backstage earlier for our pre-show on Patreon, I was like, this is a great time. Oh, wait, I'm back. I'm on this show here in a second. So,
just a shame we've got to talk about wrestling at the end of it, mate. Although, not wrestling, because I was going to open with Are You a Juggalo? Based on that our intro, mate. Were you ever a fan?
No, I'm not. But I will say, I thought there was ample evidence in that opening clip that maybe I should be. I don't know. I mean, it was a pretty dynamic clip. I must say, there was a lot of evidence, a lot of information being given there. I will say,
it was fucking fun to record.
Yeah.
How if you watch,
if you want
to go through the full Sickos playlist, which is 4,600 minutes plus. Of ICP, of ICP.
Basically, the whole career, really. Like, yeah.
Any involvement they ever had in wrestling is there for ICP. But hey, we covered the big stuff. We covered the WWE, the pre-wrestling, the WWF run, I should say, WCW run. Them in Ring of Honor, yep, that was a thing. ICP and Ring of Honor, as naturally they end up in TNA. for reasons, because
Everyone does. I'm going to be there soon, I think.
That's the next stop on this free agency, mate. But I was going to say on the music front, I was so sad we didn't get it in the show because afterwards JP was looking for theme songs for the show and he watched the Miracles music video for the first time. I wish I had JP's reaction on tape because it was blowing you. It was like it's like an early 2000s Windows screensaver, pretty much. That video was to discuss how magnets work and other such things. Look, they built a cult, JP. Somehow it's a thing.
They did. You know? A cult to the point that the FBI wanted them investigated, which seems like a waste of the FBI's resources. Like, seriously, there's cartels, lads, that you might want to go after. Just a thought. I'd leave the juggalos alone. Maybe have a go at the drug bridge as well. And then their turn at the end where it's like, hang on, we were Christians all along. Which you don't really, having watched the amount of stuff of theirs over the weekend, there wasn't that much evidence of that being being the case.
It's a subtext,
being Christians, lads.
That's what it is. But yeah, they weren't much better rappers than they were wrestlers, but there's still got a soft spot for them, and Matty definitely does. So yeah, if you get a chance, folks, definitely give that a listen. That's up on the Patreon and for our YouTube members now. And on top of that, we recorded the first episode of GRAPPLlads last week, which was just an excuse for me, Gareth, and Matty to go to the pub and press record, and people seem to have enjoyed that one as well. So if you want to know what that's like, that's out there. But plenty more coming this month as well. Well, made up to have you on, Joe. Like I said, we bumped into you as we talked about on the pre-show at York Hall, while you were on a very important journalistic mission. But it's a throwback at you, mate. Very big fan of your stuff, of your house show loop that you do, as well as the stuff you do on and off with WrestlePurists as well. So
I appreciate it, dude. Absolutely, I appreciate it. We talked about like a long time ago about doing like grapple late night grin stuff because we both, I think we like as a collective, we operate in like a similar space, right? It's like like people kind of know us, but not really, so we can like enjoy ourselves slightly. So it's fun, and we do kind of quirk. Like what you're describing sounds like something that I would be insane enough to do, right? Like
the beer grin along for that.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Is Shaggy too dope a grin grappler? Probably not, but you might make an argument for it.
It's just I think everyone's so quick to do like let's look at the TV schedule of wrestling and just do immediate reviews afterwards, and it's like here we are. To know, really just to pop ourselves, we're being honest. Like, what if instead we did this, that, or the next? It's like, it's more fun that way to me. So I'm thrilled to be on. Absolutely.
Keeps us going. So yeah, we've got a million things to talk about today. A lot of AEW, WWE. I think we've all even watched a little bit of the G1. I know from your Twitter timeline today, Joe. But we should start off with where we did bump into each other, which was the York Hall at the weekend on Sunday, the hottest place on fucking planet Earth. Do you want to get it out the way? Barcues, security. Security was great for us. I'm not sure if it was the same for everyone, but it sounds like it was overall a success. Barcues were terrible, but there were 1,200 people in there, and that's just, in fact, they weren't even that bad. They weren't as bad as I've seen them be with less people there. It was just the bar staff are fucking feckless. Hopefully they're not listening, but like they just don't take the job very seriously, JP. They're not professional bar staff like we're professional podcasters. But you get through, and we survived. But it was a day. I will say that.
Compared to the other dark experiences of getting into York Hall and getting a drink, even just a glass of water, this was just like manna from heaven. I thought the security were fine. In other words, there was no like ridiculously invasive searches. They even helped me find a vape, as I explained on my vape in the pre-show, because I put it in my pocket and it did one of those things where it fell in a hole in your jacket pocket and then slid right around to the other side through voodoo. And like they even helped me do that. Now, help from York Hall security wasn't something I had down on my bingo card for 2024, but here we are. And so they were all right. And the bar queues, they had bar staff on. I mean, I did miss the end of one of the matches, in fairness, because of that, but it was relatively quick. It wasn't like you were waiting there for the entire like matches and everything else. It was honestly, it was as pleasant as I've seen it. Outside of when it's been a quieter Rev Pro show at York Hall, so say like the TV's taping for Free Sports, when there's about 400 people in there, so there was no concerns whatsoever. It was easy to go and get a drink and whatnot. But like this was like honestly, it felt like kind of like pleasant. And the heat was the heat. What can I say? Was it the hottest day of the year? Is that right?
Felt like it.
I'm not sure.
Well, you two were in Hawaiian shirts, weren't it? That's the
yes. Yeah, dude, if I had a black wrestling shirt on, I'd have just run out of the building. I think I don't know. I couldn't have done it. Like, I had this massive Hawaiian shirt on. I still was suffocating under it, dude.
I was black grapple shirt. It was a huge mistake.
I bet, yeah.
I was gonna say that, Joe. Like, I know obviously I watch your stuff and that, but I actually don't know. Like, have you got like, were you a Brit Res guy like during the boom? Is it like something you were in? I didn't think it was, but like,
absolutely not.
Can't have been to York Hall that many times then.
I've been to York Hall, but because of the international attractions. First, I went to York Hall for wrestling was the October 2015 show that AJ worked. AJ, Okada, Tanahashi. I mean, you look back at that now and you think like it was kind of crazy that happened there, right? And I thought that at the time, to be fair. I did that, and then the next night was like, it was Reading, and the one attraction that wasn't at York Hall was the Good Brothers, which to anyone else wouldn't have mattered, but to me was like, shit, I have to go to Reading. Like,
we need to talk about this.
We need, because this was. Is this a story for you guys too? Like, because this was.
Yeah, I was there too.
Okay. And they did like a DQ finish or something, and yeah, I remember that vividly. That was the first. I've been to a few. Like, I was at the AJ Zach match. I've been there a few. I just don't. I wasn't a big like Brit Res is booming guy. That wasn't my. It wasn't my personality.
The real question now, though, is well, it wasn't a good path, but we're still here, JP. So we've left it away. I've got to ask about Reading now, because maybe you will make me feel better about this now, Joe. Because I thought I was the only person who slipped a crisp £10 note into the hands of Doc Gallows to get a picture with Gallows and Anderson throwing the 2 sweets on. He could not have taken that tenner off me quicker. I might have even got away with not paying them. He was just so happy that somebody offered them money. I told them the podcast was shit. I got my photo and I moved on. That was my experience. Now I'm just imagining you must have been behind me in the queue, mate, with a couple of 20s or something like that for the lads. Very
ironic for me to say this now after the weekend that just went, but there is nothing I'm less keen on doing than meeting professional wrestlers. So we walked. That's like I'm the weird one there, to be clear. But like we walked into the building. My brother and I walked into the building. And we were talking shop listeners, and it just like we wasn't used to the way the culture was. So you walk in, and the first thing you see is AJ and the Good Brothers behind gimmick tables. It's like it's just weird, right? It's a strange.
Why can't I just touch them? They're right there,
right. And what you immediately notice is. AJ, think what you will of his many different parts of his personality, but when fans are coming up to him, he's listening to what they say, right? He's talking to them. And there's these friends, the Good Brothers, so they're a bit more transactional with these matters. They're kind they're bringing people through, and my brother wanted to go up to he wanted to meet. He wanted to get a picture with them, but he definitely wanted to get a picture with Kushida, and he bottled it because he may or may not have been on some substances, and I'll leave that there. But
Kushida,
bro, Kushida in October 2015, that was like, he was like one of the premier juniors. He wrestled Tyler Ryder the night before. So, so I remember it was an intermission, and I remember getting up to use the bathroom. And as I turned the corner, there he is. The big LG is charging. I mean, like Usain Bolt style. He's sprinting towards his gimmick table because no time can be wasted, bro. There's Bullet Club shirts to sell. There's 2 sweets to give. And they went and had a match. Definitely had a match. I don't remember it. I remember there was a DQ finish. That was the night before they worked WXW with Zach and Volta, I think. Yeah, well, the night after.
That
one
makes
or the other.
sense.
Yeah.
I would. It's funny because that's an important show for me because that's like I think I reconnected with the other Joe who used to do the show with us, JP. I think you were in the building, weren't you? It was like the first Rev Pro show I'd been to because it was like I didn't know who Ospreay was. It was like who's this flippy English lad who they're putting in there with Okada. There's no way he's going to be up to the level. And I was like, oh. Maybe he is. I think Okada had that same reaction, didn't he, that night? But again, after the show, I still wasn't getting a picture with Okada or this young Ospreay. It was still Gallows and Anderson. For some reason, that's where my money was going. While we mates were literally, I think I actually do have a picture somewhere with me, Cy Valor, who came back to wrestling this weekend, JP, and Okada from that weekend as well. Nakamura was knocking around as well. But it was like a big moment for me. Where it was like, oh. British wrestling isn't that shit thing that I was involved in, and like I almost laughed at people for watching on VOD. It's like, who's watching DVDs of British wrestling? It almost like changed, my perspective on it. That show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was also a weird like middle ground in time because what we were watching was about to explode. Both obviously Brit Rest, but like I think people were only just starting. I mean, in the States more so, but here I think the New Japan product only started to like cross over. Like the main event of that show, correct me if I'm wrong, the main event is Liger and AJ, right?
AJ, yeah.
And I remember vividly, tiny house, and Shinsuke and Okada are sitting with their phones recording the match, watching the match, because they're obviously like, it was ridiculous. AJ Styles and Jushin Liger. It was a weird time. It was a fun show. That whole time, I'm kind of nostalgic for that time, like discovering stuff like that. It was fun, man. It was really fun.
Yeah.
It was.
I remember JP, where you were there?
I wasn't at that one. I went to the first one, the one that got me back for it. And I'm annoyed that I missed the Reading. It would have been childcare stuff. But it was like I was annoyed at missing the Reading because I wasn't that far from me in Oxford. And I was like, bloody hellfire. And then lo and behold, nothing changed on that front. But then like I always think of when Tanahashi came in and he wrestled Redacted in the main event at York Hall. I'd say that a lot.
Could be anyone, by the way.
Really,
it's a long
anyone
list,
of 50 odd people.
Fortunately,
but it was always like oh my god, Tanahashi's coming over. We're not getting fake Undertakers, and that was the thing that kind of got think. Oh, hang on a minute, this product is pretty good. And then Joe was there, and obviously I worked with Joe, and he was like, no, these guys they run Portsmouth, they run Southampton, and so he was more familiar with like the Rev Pro product, and then that's what got me into that loop as well. And then going to York Hall became a thing that happened like it was like every other month. It was like, we're going to York Hall, we're going down there this weekend, going to do that, and it was just like a regular thing, rather like going to Progress. It was just like, okay, these shows are on and they're booming. And the tickets are there, and we're getting to see, like you just said, Joe. It was seeing things on the cusp, so it was like, it wasn't. It'd be difficult to say like this wasn't like the new, like we were in the midst of a New Japan glory period, but a lot of that glory period couldn't be seen easily in the UK.
Yeah,
you still had to go out and try and hunt it down and nick it, basically, if you didn't want to watch most of this stuff. But they were there. So the idea of Hiroshi Tanahashi, who I remember always described as Cena-hashi, was like, well, I want to see this guy for myself. And I was like, yeah, he's no John Cena, this lad. He was, only 10 years ago, but he was in like peak condition, and he was just coming to such like a massive star. I didn't even think he was that big when I watched him on TV, and then you see him up close, you're like, nah, he's a big lad. He's a big lad, Hiroshi. But that was the thing. It was new and it was exciting, and you got to see genuine international stars. Like, and it was because there was only be like one or two of them at a time. You weren't overexposed.
Yeah, we got spoiled after a while, didn't we?
We did.
For sure, like anything. And I think that was a sweet spot. I always think about the fact that as IWGP champ, AJ did Bowler. Like, dude, imagine that now. Imagine like a chaos. And like now there's a match announcement. Obviously, PWG has what's happening now, but like a couple of years when PWG came back, and there's a match announcement. Like, everything gets dissected now, right? And because of the way the news cycle is, it's like the IWGP champ he worked Roddy Strong in Reseda.
Yeah.
He also wrestled Brian Myers, but I don't want to talk about that right now, so we'll move on.
Good spell. But it's like this show, like one of our listeners was in the queue, I think he was saying, and like there was a dad and lad there, and the dad hadn't told his lad that MJF was going to be on the show. He was like, don't say nothing, just like he knows he's coming to wrestling, he doesn't know he's about to see MJF. And like that's what this show kind of reminded me of, that era where it was like, it's gigantic. It shouldn't be like undersold. It's like, a top WWE star turning up at an indie. It's not happening, is it? It's not. You're not getting Roman Reigns in that scenario. You're not getting Seth Rollins in that scenario. Really, like, especially for a match. Like, the idea it was there, it made it feel like those glory days for me. I don't know.
That's
if
why I went.
Same, but
That's why I like. Look, just to be totally honest, I wasn't too sure I was going to like Max's actual match with Michael Oku. I didn't know. Like, I ended up liking it quite a bit, but I thought there was a version of it that that's fair enough. I thought there was a version of that match that I thought would have we'll get to it. But I went because there was a novelty to it. And the big thing, and the reason I think the WWE comparison's apt in this case, is they have strong TV here AEW does. So it's like MJF is, if you've watched AEW TV, you've seen MJF almost certainly, right? So it was an event. You could feel it. The atmosphere was, you immediately noticed how full it was, right? Good Lord.
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely.
It did. It felt like one of those shows, like Ewan says, Sophia said on Discord. It was a
Yeah.
2017 Your Hall show with a 2016 Heat. Like that's what it felt like. JP
Yeah.
did, you know. And I heard those tales like before, like the Reading show. I mean, don't get me wrong, I've been to IPW UK shows, but I hadn't been to like those like Rev Pro shows up to that point. But that's always what it kind of felt like, and they were the reasons we were going back to Your Hall all the time, wasn't it? And Your Hall show comes up for Rev Pro, it's going to be something significant and important these days, and it will often get me down there, JP. But this was the most where it felt like that, where it was like with 2 weeks notice, it was like, okay, I can get the car and I can drive down on the Sunday and I can stay in Maidenhead and I can figure this out and make it work, even not being a gigantic MJF fan. I constantly criticize him on this show, but the idea that he was there was almost more than the reality of him being there. It was like a gigantic AEW star is at this Rev Pro Your Hall show. It felt like a happening. It felt like something had to be at, JP.
And it was even kind of like, and particularly because it ties into All In and it ties into canon. That's what's happening on AEW TV. So it gave it that greater significance. And it was like even the times of like seeing, like we're mentioning about Tanahashi or Nakamura or Okada, you knew you were going to get a certain type of match out of them when you saw them in York Hall, but you knew it wasn't going to be like Sumo Hall. It wasn't going to be that kind of level of match.
Like
but
a level of heat.
I mean, like, we certainly had the literal heat in there for it as well. But this one kind of like even had a bit more in the way of stakes and storyline going in and out as well. So like, and then you had like effectively an undercut because and Rev Pro have made no bones about this themselves. This was originally going to be a 229 show, a 229
Southampton,
with, with a 229 card effectively. With a couple of like kind of like your imports like your Trevor Lees and your Donovan Dijaks. And it's just the fact that MJF says, I want to do this, and therefore this is happening. It's like, well, you're duty bound then to move. So you get like your call at the last minute for it, and they sell it out. And you just think, that's like, I mean, it's a very good like shot in the arm, I think, all round for like, certainly for Rev Pro and their perspective. I'll be like fascinated to see how AEW portray this on their TV this week. I think that's half the interest of like how deep into the weeds do they go, or do they show it for 30 seconds? It's like, no, actually, you should be playing on this like a hell of a lot more, and certainly then leading into Cardiff and stuff. But I'm getting well ahead of myself at this stage. But it had like, I wanted to be there because it felt like like you say, it's an experience, because it's a proper main event star of the second biggest company in the world. And it's not like going to see that in 2014, 2015, where there was such a distance between WWE and everyone else. There is less of that distance that's there, regardless of like whether or not the year on years and things like that, and TV ratings and whatnot. Like it's still the second biggest company in the world, and you've got their like arguably like certainly one of their top 3 big stars is coming over there to work a match, and that's not to be sniffed at.
It was very, there's a lot of parts of MJF's game that will be and have been debated, right? And that will go on forever and ever, and that's fine. It is increasingly apparent that he is the guy who's actually got across that bridge from like, he'll be a top guy. He is actually a top guy now, right? Now, again, there are variables there and different elements at play, and I think there's some by hook or by crook, certainly even, but he's got across there. I don't think there's another guy you could have booked for your call on Sunday that's never been in WWE that would have earned the response of us three of all people going, that's a happening, right? Like,
yeah.
And we're not big fans, but we all felt it was a happening. I think that speaks to something,
Like that's the loudest thing I could say I've heard your call, JP, as well. Like the entrance, I put a video up of like of the Ospreay bit that came later, obviously, and MJF's entrance, and just in general, it was just a different level, wasn't it? It made you think, we've been quite down on the Wembley build, and we don't forget it, do we? That there's still going to be 50,000 people there, but we can't help but as analysts go, oh well, it's 50, but it was 80 last year, so we're all going to analyze why that difference is there, and it just reminded me like, oh, there's gonna be an atmosphere there for like this Ospreay and MJF match, and like it's clearly such a gigantic deal that it's like giving like this heat to it. It's like, Ewan says there in the chat, for Rev Pro, the positive is it's a shop window for the Copper Box show. We can talk like the match itself and the atmosphere, but we can't get away from the conversation of, is it worth that? With the result of the match that was probably inevitable, and the way they had to go about booking the show. If once you've got MJF there and he's the AEW American Champion, we all knew he wasn't losing to Michael Oku. I wasn't 100% expecting him to go over as significant as he did. We can kind of get into that as well, but I just think you snap your hand off, don't you, if you're Rev Pro? And the fact that it's come from, because Oku did an interview with Steph, that's up on a YouTube. I would highly recommend anyone check it out. And he was confirming the reports that it was literally MJF texting Andy Quildan and going, I want to come and work Michael Oku. And then Quildan scrambling and sending an SOS message to Michael Oku going, dude, you got this date free, right? Because of course Rev Pro are going to snap the fingers off to do that. And of course they're going to do it. Like, no matter what, really. It's got to be worth it, hasn't it, to get this level of attention, like you said, JP, to get the footage on Dynamite, to sell a few more tickets to the Copper Box. Like, there's clearly limits to know what you want to do. Put your world champion in there with with AEW, one of AEW's champions, and maybe not have him win a couple of weeks before Copper Box. That's the negative, but the positives, I think I'll land on, just outweigh that so much.
Yeah.
Oh God, yeah. Yeah, I mean, from a simple, and you've got to think of this as a business decision as much as anything else, and you've got to think within the context of like, I don't want to say things like the last couple of weeks of AEW TV being kind of like meh, really for large swathes of it, just something that reinvigorates a bit of a vibe around wrestling fans, and that's what this managed to do. And I think, like Ewan says there in the chat, it's like, it was like a 5-star atmosphere for the main event. It felt like a big time main event. It felt packed. There was lots of people standing up around the place. It was like absolutely heaving, and it was worth doing. It was definitely worth doing. It wasn't Vader when he was wrestling Ospreay. We weren't getting that type of scenario where he was like, you should be putting him over. I think there was that expectancy because it was the American title, it was on the line. It wasn't, it was inevitable what the result was going to happen, and I think we all kind of knew it's how they get there. And I didn't, and because I accepted that was going to be the case, I thought, well, I don't really have that much in the way of quibbles, because if it had been 10 minutes half-assed and he wins, yeah, that would have been massively disappointing. But it kind of even wasn't that. Even if the match itself I thought was fine rather than anything particularly great, but that's kind of okay, because you've got to think of like the overriding kind of like business side of this as well. And it's just a shot in the arm for Rev Pro. Hopefully they would have got it like rental wise at a decent rate, and then the way that they've flogged all of the tickets and everything else, it's good. And it makes people think, well, are they going to be going to 229 shows and all the other various Rev Pro shows and the Copper Box, more importantly? I think like you're going to find that it's going to shift a few tickets, in which case it's job done.
Yeah, and I suppose for me, we can get into the match itself. Sounds like, Joe, you might be a bit higher on it than me. You know, some of the MJF comedy stuff, the Hogan stuff he was doing early on was like, I was laughing in the moment, and it was like, I don't know about that when he's supposed to be like this, serious healer in this moment. I'm not sure it was the right course. It was crowd pleasing, don't get me wrong. It was loud in there for a reason, and it was worked towards that. A couple of his worst tendencies, it felt like for me, came out in the match a little bit, but I suppose the starting point I'd say on the match, the only thing I'm mostly surprised, and I don't know if you're the same, Joe, I just was expecting a non-finish. I think my bigger criticism, rather than maybe the match layout, was I thought they'd get away with it. If it was just a gigantic schmoz and the Ospreay run-in happens and, we lose track of it, and it's like, oh, well, we didn't get a finish, but look at all the setup we've done for Copper Box and we've done for Wembley. I was just a little bit surprised MJF went over so strongly. I know there was the nonsense with Luke Jacobs, taking them both out, but it was kind of like, it was the 1-2 combo as well of like MJF pinning Oku clean in the middle, then taking him out after the match as well, and then Ospreay made the save, which of course was the point you wanted to get to for the big pop, to again sell Wembley and do that bit of business for AEW. But I was a little bit taken aback by that, so maybe that's colouring my take on the match. Don't know about you.
Maybe. I honestly, I kind of expected that MJF would win, to be honest, and I thought it would come with some bells and whistles, which it certainly did, right?
Yeah.
That much is for sure. I don't know what the consensus is on the match. I haven't actually seen a ton of discussion about it. Maybe for the best. I don't know. Those things usually go quite poorly nowadays. But I actually liked the match. But I think the big question with this match is, what version of MJF do you like?
Yeah.
Because I think your point is absolutely fair in saying that he's supposed to be this kind of, this crazed, sinister heel, and he's doing a lot of shtick. I personally think he's actually better off as a sort of crowd work heavy, I'd say this politely, but kind of caricature, to be honest with you. I think that's what that's his personality. I think sometimes when he goes in the other direction and is a super serious, I am actually the best wrestler in the world, it actually has the opposite effect for me. So I like the match more. Right, exactly. So for me, I like the match more than I expected to because, number one, I kind of thought he may I didn't think he was going to work very hard. And I think it's fair to say they had a real match. Or they put in a lot of time and they had a real match. In the end, it took them a while to get going, obviously, but in the end. So that surprised me. And also, there was a version of this match that I kind of saw in my head. If Max was going to work hard, I feared it was going to be like a PWG match, which it got bombastic and epic at the end. But a lot of the match, the meat of the match, to me anyway, was Oku stuff kind of being plugged in, and I liked it in the same way I liked MJF's match with Kyle Fletcher. I prefer that to when he is kind of swinging for the fences in I can do the star ratings too fashion, which he can be very guilty of. So I like the match personally.
How about you, JP?
I thought it was good, but then I think this is one of the few times where I knew what I was getting myself into. I knew that this was more about the spectacle and the setup for other bigger stuff happening for both companies towards the end of the month. So I thought there was some it was a bit slow at the start. I mean, it's quite a long match as well. It's like 27 minutes. Is that right? It's a bit of a meaty match. And then obviously you've got some of the, like you say, Joe, the bells and whistles towards the end as well. And I didn't think Oku looked incredibly weak. I didn't get that vibe from it for me, but I think I might be alone in thinking that as well. I thought it was good rather than thinking it was great. And actually that's okay. That's kind of fine because all the people who want to see MJF, did they get did they get an MJF experience? Yes, absolutely. And they got that heel version of it. Did Michael Oku look like someone who was still portrayed as a big deal, certainly within Rev Pro? Yeah.
And his character's very much underdog babyface as well, it should be said, even though I'm critical of it. Yeah, that fits. He does too. And you say to the MJF point as well, that is the enjoyment I go out of it, being that close and up personal, watching MJF do his shtick. And like I say, he's a wrestler who, just in totality, 40% of what he does I love. There's a 40% of it I hate, and then there's 20% I'm not sure on. And it was exactly that experience. It was I don't know about this Hogan stuff. And then I'm watching him jaw-jack with the fans in the front row and kind of get vicious with Oku and getting to see that up close and getting to see someone of his level, which I think we all agree, he's a high-level performer on his day. Getting to see that up close in such a small setting was cool to watch those little things that he did as well. So definitely wasn't that I didn't get no enjoyment out of the match. I was maybe a little bit lower on it than used to. I mean, that kind of sums up the card in a lot of ways. I thought most of the matches were good. I don't think there was anything necessarily great, and I think that probably
the heat I think was. I think that was a real problem for some. Honestly,
Oku was covered in sweat on his entrance, as was MJF. Literally,
it was outrageous. I mean, we've said it enough, but we cannot stress it enough. Seriously, it was ridiculous in that building. So.
I know Michael Oku was talking about in his interview with Steph as well. He was just talking about before he'd even taken off his jacket, just dripping in sweat. Beforehand, I was like, mate, you weren't alone on that one. We were all very much like that. But it was kind of
some smells in your hall that day, and it wasn't the wrestlers.
There were.
That'll be said. It was a hot fucking day.
It fucking was. But I think it's a strange show because, I mean, without going past this match, it's almost like the major two kind of matches almost are the first match, which is the James Castle, the tribute match with James Castle between Gideon Gray and Dan McGee, which got it was fantastic reception and atmosphere for that, and like how the crowd reacted, and really
like
like
putting that on first. I thought
absolutely
doing the intro with Andy Quilden doing a great job of like putting it all together and everything, and the video packages they showed with like ex and current Rev Pro wrestlers and all of that as well. Like that was. Oh, well, obviously, Zoe Lucas coming out as well was so well done. It was that was the time to do the match, like wasn't it? It was to do that nice intro and go straight into the match, and the crowd were loud, as Gideon Gray asked for. That was the other like high end of the show for me, JP.
And that's it, isn't it? And then you've got those two things, and because it was on first, they didn't like short it because of time and everything else, and they wrestled like I think I described it to you at the time. It was like this is the match they'd have in a training school. Like this is the kind of like the match you'd have in front of other wrestlers, and they'd admire lots of the little things they did, and it was, but the crowd like reacted for it. They made sure they delivered on all the things that Gideon Grace had the promo. So you had that, and you had the MJF match at the end, and you think, well, there you're kind of your two big tent poles. Everything else in between kind of just needs to be like fun and show a direction of where you're going to at the Copper Box, and it did that. And in some ways, that's what I'd expect from a 229 show. Is the kind of card I got there. I wouldn't be going to a 229 show and expecting to see like 5-star classics and everyone going all out. You kind of go, well, you're going to save yourself a Copper Box, aren't you? It's the road too. It's just that we're having this in the bigger venue because of MJF, and that's and you know what? That's fine. That's okay. Like, I mean, God, you speak about like SummerSlam and everything else, and how much that delivered in terms of like storyline and other stuff. Without getting into our whole argument, I can't play Matty this week for this one. But like you think to yourself, like it did the job that it needed to do, and it kept that fan base happy. And I think that this show very much did a lot of the similar things.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, you got the sense that people were satisfied with. I think there's a lot to be said for the audience that went for MJF in particular. They certainly got the show, as you said. I mean, the promo and everything that comes with that. And I think everything else was about where I'd have expected it to be honest. And that's fine. As you said, like, I thought it was a fun show. A fun show.
Definitely. And that's it. If you're there, you're a kid there, it's just to see MJF. And then you get Ospreay coming out as like a big surprise. Exactly. Although I think it got around the building at that point that he was out there.
A little bit, yeah.
It was you or maybe another podcaster who told me he was there. And I was like, yeah, I think everyone knows at this point. Everyone knew to expect that. But like that was, again, predictable isn't bad. You get kind of what you wanted, and the focus coming out of the show is on that, which we can get into. But yeah, to talk some of the rest of the show, like Gideon Gray and Dan McGee, like you said, JP, I thought it was just a classy bit of business altogether.
Yeah, it was very nice.
Says there in the chat with the belt and everything. That was lovely. Leon Slater and Jack Cartwheel didn't quite hit the heights that I was maybe hoping for in silliness. Like it was almost like one of those matches I was wanting it to be as like anti-Gareth as possible for me, JP, a bit like the ICP mixtape. I wanted no holds. I just wanted nonsense. And I got some nonsense, but maybe not enough. And I think, again, the heat, a match like that with two lads who are going out to do like a big athletic match, you probably can't expect too much more than they did, but still fun to see. Jack Cartwheel's the type of wrestler, one and done. You want to see him in a territory once and then just move on, do the cartwheel somewhere else, mate. I don't need to see it every week, but I enjoyed him for what I saw, and it was cool to see your boy Leon again, JP.
Do you know what I think I was saying to you during this match? I was like, these are two lads who, weirdly, I thought I could see Jack Cartwheel in NXT. I know he said NME there as well, which would have been like a real shock if they set up some sort of band between themselves and they got in there, or Kerrang, who can tell. But I thought he kind of like he looked the part of professional wrestler, which was absolutely fine. And Leon, like, it was inevitable what was going to happen because you had the Copper Box coming up. It was like he fulfilled the role of import who can take a loss, and he'll do a few more places around the UK, and he's kind of got his act down, and he wasn't going all out as well. So, mate, and this is the problem because I don't watch GCW just on the general point of principle that like I don't see him doing like enough.
I'll just add me flag. It's
normally WrestleMania weekend. It's like, it's that cartwheel bloke again. But whereas like Leon Slater can do stuff, but again, I think that's fine. I think if you're saving yourself for the 6-way, that's all right. That's
good win for that, isn't it?
It works perfectly for that.
Yeah. I think Leon he feels like the actual guy to circle in the scene to me, you know, and has felt that way for a while now. And he's still so young. What amazes me about
big thing in January with like the TNA like sign and everything, it felt like he'd be their guy this year, and it just it's fizzled, hasn't it? Like everything.
Must be Scott D'Amore. I have to assume because it's like Harley Hudson. There's no kind of appearances, and they talk about going to the UK.
We're gonna get down for glory over here, weren't we? It's not happening.
Yeah.
It's clearly not happening. You know.
Yeah, I don't know. It's frustrating because at the time, I actually liked the move for him because it was like. He can do some US TV and get that experience, but he doesn't have to be hidden away in a warehouse, you know, in theory.
Yes.
But at least he's been able to do these things. I think what stands out about him is it's like, obviously, the highlight reel stuff is going to capture, like, you know, the online imagination, but there's more to his game than that. There's actually some depth to what Leon can do in there. And I think people that see the clips probably assume he's one way, and he can do more than that. He's still super young. So, yeah, he's tremendous.
Those types of guys, and you see it in the GCW undercards all the time. Like, there's a load of guys who can do those moves, aren't there?
Exactly.
But there's something different. There's a reason someone like Leon stands out because he's different. It's not just he does the moves better, is it? You know. So yeah, glad to see him go on to Copperbox. In the middle of the card, what else stood out for me? Zazaya and Ricky Knight Jr. I think. So, as a positive, look-wise, you said about Jack Cartwheel, JP. Zazaya I'd seen bits of on the VOD, and obviously. We all know the story of Rev Pro going to Spain and basically bringing him back, and now he's just a Rev Pro guy. And I get why. Like, we were going in, weren't we, JP? And I thought it was Nick Wayne at first. I was like, Nick Wayne's put some bulk on. He looks well. Like, what's going on? And then I realised who it was. And, like, he stood out, like, head and shoulders above everybody. Say about execution. You know, his execution is top level as well. Match was obviously derailed by the finish. He was never making it over on that shooting star press, and unfortunately, he knocked out Ricky Knight Jr. Even before that, though, it was just a bit too Ricky Knight Jr. for me. It was like, they're brawling on the stage now for reasons, and it was a lot of Ricky Knight Jr.'s indulgences that I don't necessarily love. But who knows? Maybe they would, with a few more minutes, something more would have come of it. But I was impressed by Zazaya. I thought he looked good.
I thought he looked good. I missed the finish. That was the thing. Like, and trust me, it's like he's wearing Speedos, for God's sakes, isn't it, as well? I had to like make a note of that.
Sprayed on me.
I missed the finish because I was queuing at the bar, which is a York Hall kind of tradition, really, isn't it? That you're gonna miss some aspects of that. But like I saw it just sort of went to a finish. I was like, what the hell happened here?
Yeah. It was one of those terrible situations, and I sympathise with the referee, but it was the 1-2, is it? And then which is
that.
It's
I don't know if you should call it
bad.
as a shoot or not. I don't know what the answer is.
I don't know, but it's always bad, but it's worse in these situations. Again, loves the referee, but the problem in the situation is when everyone in the building can tell that the guy is like clearly, as soon as he landed, if you saw it, you'd have known like he was done. You know, it was brutal. It was brutal looking. Hopefully everyone's okay, but that was a bit of a rough night at the office, I thought, unfortunately.
He also kind of slightly summarises where Ricky Knight Jr. is, isn't it? He's in a mid-card match against someone who is new and up and coming, which used to be the role that he very much filled for a period of time during the pandemic. And he's like, where is he now? There was points in time where I was like, there's a whole series of storylines you can see coming out of this. Like, you thought most of his family will end up in there at various points and he'll have his own big stable and everything else. And it's just not sort of happened. It's like he's kind of like treading water. Really.
I was going to ask about that because the last time I think I went York Hall. No, I went for the Rumble gimmick they do, but the one I remember last summer was when he won the belt from Ospreay. And like there's a lot of young wrestlers. There are things there that you kind of go, well, maybe not that, but it seemed apparent to me that was like Will trying to kind of crown him as the new face of the scene. So for me, like, I was kind of wondering what even talking points are about that. Is it just a thing where everyone's kind of shrugging their shoulders? I don't know.
I think like him and Oku were kind of like neck and neck as who's going to be the next guy, and that was kind of the story they were telling. And Oku's just lapped him. He's just I don't know what it is. Like I say, some of the bad habits in his matches, a motivation thing, making bookings thing. I don't want to say, a lot of that, a lot of those other things. But yeah, he's someone who could be like that other guy, like that yin and yang for Rev Pro, and it hasn't really materialised as a JP, but that's kind of his role in there and things. Now maybe even the family will get a run out today at Wembley if they're not busy in your local town centre. We'll see what happens, but outside of that, in the middle of the card, I think I'm being classist there. Sorry, JP. I thought Danny Luna and Nina Samuels was a positive in the mid card. I think that after that happening, that kind of changed the mood a little bit. Everyone's overall complimentary, aren't they, JP, about like the booking of this women's division. There were a couple of the girls who were out there, and I'm like, bloody, these have all been brought in for this angle. You know, you would think a couple of those girls would be booked elsewhere doing something else, but it speaks to the strength of the way this has been booked, and the fact that this angle has gotten over. And the only thing I will say is the promo segment after it did last a very, very very long time, but I think it's still going on now, to be honest. But the match itself was good, maybe not necessarily the follow up, but I like what Rev Pro doing in the women's division overall.
They're building up, like you could see it on some of the smaller shows. You can have the whole variety of various singles matches, and there's at least reasons for them to exist. I mean, let's probably say a lot of this when we talk about WWE later on. Like, as long as you're giving people reason to be there, and you're not having having this match really for the sake of it, which in some cases you've got import plus local person, and that's fine. Like they are different to everything else because you're kind of seeing them against the level of people who have got that polish of TV. Whereas here, I mean, I like the Cutthroat Collective. Like, I mean, particularly like Lizzie Evo, I thought stood out at ringside, and it might just be her accent. It might just be the look that she has, the way she had her hair done. It seemed a bit like mad. But even like Sapphire Reed as well, like just looking like really angry. And I thought, okay, this will be a fun match. And it'll be like, because last year's Copper Box, obviously, the women's match just got overtaken by a hardcore country chant. Now, here, I'm expecting just a 10-woman brawl, just a mad brawl around the place that's going to go kind of.
Still got a fifth person for that team, JP. You never know. I don't think they'll make that call. I don't think it's not their fault, but I don't think Mickie James is getting that phone call this year just in case.
No, God, no. Jeez. There's plenty of people from AEW that can get a loan off.
You would think, wouldn't you?
Certainly, yeah.
You throw out Hikaru Shida, you throw out a Serena Deeb. Like, there are people they can use who aren't being used in AEW that's easy enough to get. I mean, they had Sky Blue, didn't they? Like, like last year as well. So, like, I think anything along those lines. I mean, Ewan saying here in the chat, he thinks it'd be Aja Kong. That would be like kind of like pretty spectacular to have that happen. But at least, again, it's like the job they've done in building up Danny Luna as well, combined with her work in TNA and in other places as well, has made her like a serious fixture and very established in the women's scene.
JP, as Don says here in the chat, JP and Don were trying to get Zoe Lucas to do a run-in. Not sure that's how wrestling works, but you might have talked her into it. Who knows? She might have made the save. I was expecting that. Like I say, I think you could tell when the promo train happened and then the angle happened, and then like you could tell somebody backstage was hitting the music like, come on girls, we need to get done here, we've got more matches to go. I was expecting someone from AEW to appear on the screen or something to break the, like I say, they probably didn't all need promos, but yeah, you'd hope that relationship would bear fruit there, and
you would.
Happens in a
I'm glad the post-match, the length for the post-match was apparent. It wasn't just me being like an asshole. I kind of wondered. I was like, good lord. But I really liked it. And the thing I appreciate of the match was like sometimes on these shows, the undercard, when you get to 4 or 5 matches, you go, all right, fellas, there's a lot of forearms on this show. And I understand you got fighting spirit and you're going to hit the ropes and trade clothesline. But in this match, clear baby face and heel, right? And the heel was super doing a lot of shtick. And it's like the variety show is like the lamest wrestling talking point because everyone uses it incorrectly. It's like, but that's actually a case of variety show, right? Like, I want different types of matches. I thought this was not only legitimately good, but it was a different type of good. And by the finish, because initially the York Hall crowd was kind of tame at the start, right? They'd just seen an injury in the last match. They completely hooked them. By the end of the match, they were rocking for this. It was good to see. Very good to see.
definitely. And yeah, outside of that, the other two matches on the undercard we kind of haven't covered. We have Trevor Lee, Luke Jacobs we can get into, and mostly the before the match I mostly enjoyed about that with Ethan Allen and Connor Bills. But before that, we got to talk about Robbie Exeter and Donovan Dijak, and less so the match and more that promo afterwards. I'm hoping, Joe, you're not a big Donovan Dijak defender, because me and JP were just pissing ourselves at his Shawn Michaels suck-up promo after this.
Well,
what's going on?
I have great news both for you guys, the audience, and myself. When this match was about to come on, was when I got the thing of quickly commentate this photo. The photo. This is the way we're talking about it, right? Like,
oh, it's going in the images, mate. Don't worry. People will see it.
Appreciate it. And I thought to myself, this couldn't go better. I'm going to get a great picture for the social media, but more importantly, I will not watch the Donovan Dijak match. I've never been so happy. I mean, I was just thrilled. And as I walked back into York Hall, all I heard was, "You won't hear me bury Shawn Michaels." And I thought, oh, he's had himself a great night here at York Hall. It sounds about right.
A load of people have made the joke, but it's pure Vince McMahon loved me, but Johnny Ace, that cunt, he's the one who got me sacked. It's like, mate, if Shawn loved you so much, he'd still be there. He's got that power. He could probably sort it out. I just find the man just so cringe. Whether he's, allegedly charging for interviews with podcasters, or he's out there doing promos like this. Like, he's just, I don't know. I understand why he's on the show, JP. I understand why he's on the Copper Box. The other kind of takeaway from this is, speaking of a little bit cringe, but I actually like his side of cringe, Gabe Kidd obviously challenged him for Copper Box, which led to that long promo segment. I get it. There aren't many big indie names who you can slot into that spot, but I'm just not a Donovan Dijak fan whatsoever. I'm hoping Gabe Kidd goes over quite decisively that one, JP.
Oh God, yeah, and I hope he absolutely gives him a slagging over that interview as that post-match promo as well for that. Cause I was disgusted. I did turn around to a wrestler. I said, "You like Bret Hart?" And he went, "No, I find him boring." And I thought, I've worked a long way getting around to liking you again, and you've just made me instantly dislike you for that. No, it was. Oh, mate, no. You
still
not even
WrestleMania 12 Iron Man match,
like that's not his fault. In some ways, like I've seen some fun Donovan Dijak matches. I won't lie, for that as well. I just think maybe it's just me, but it seems like he's coming back onto the indies, not with the point to prove, but more along the lines of, I'm a big star. And maybe that's just me, and maybe that's just a vibe.
That's a great
that I got from him. It's just I don't know about that, mate. I think you were a masked bloke in some group of fucking hackers. The last thing I knew, less than anything else. But I mean, I try and go back and I think back at the matches he had with Keith Lee. I remember seeing one of those in the cockpit, which is just fucking nuts. To think of it, these two giants inside the world's smallest arena as well. But yeah, I mean, I just hope it'll be Gabriel Kidd doing Gabriel Kidd things, and he'll probably get a big face reaction for it as well. Hopefully, on the back of that post-match promo, so should be good fun.
Yeah, I don't know. Dijak's one of those wrestlers where he kind of leaves me wondering if I'm missing something. So I'm thrilled to be on this show where we're all unanimously we're not missing anything. We're standing firm. I like it.
If Matty was here, he'd be the lone defender of the Keith Lee Dijak matches from mid-2000s indies. But for me, it was like, indies are dead here. Like, oh, cool, the big lads are doing flips.
It's just, it just gets exhausting after a while, right? It's like,
I always tell a story, but I'll always remember me, Matty, and his cousin were on an ROH Liverpool show. And literally, Matty's cousin Gary was tweeting about the match. It was shite. The match was terrible. He's like, "Yeah, what's with this Dijak? He's crap." Some tweet like that. Literally, the music was still playing. Dijak got backstage and replied to the tweet. He was already in on Twitter. And that's him. That sums him up. And that promo too is the other one as well. Just not for me. But maybe $250 would change my mind. But anywho, Trevor Lee and Luke Jacobs. Yeah, this was one where I think you were looking for your vape. I think this
I was
one, JP. Pretty good. Probably one of the better matches of the night, I would say. I liked Obviously, Luke Jacobs in there against insert indie name, I think is a good formula. If we're talking about Oku and RKJ, they were the next in line. It's very clearly Luke now. Won't shock me if he wins the belt at the copper box. But thought it was a really good showing for him. Trevor Lee, I almost didn't recognise. He was knocking around the merch area, and it was just like, I was like, who's that Rev Pro trainee with the funny haircut? And I slowly realised, oh yeah, that's Trevor Lee. That's just what he looks like now. But I thought he looked good in the match, and like I said before, I thought the pre-match was actually really well done with, like Connor Mills and Ethan Allen brawling to the back. That felt legit. It felt like real heat, and if that's a big match as well. And Connor Mills has massively impressed me this year, and I want to see more of him there. But what did you make of this match, Joe? Was I suppose the last one to talk about?
I like this. I mean, I've kind of buried the lead with like. This is one of those matches where you get a lot of the stuff I was describing earlier, right? Where the lads are sort of clobbering each other and everyone, and it's. But I will say both guys do it well. I think Trevor Lee is like a really good pro wrestler, and I think the quality of his stuff was very apparent on this show. I thought, especially in these conditions, and he's kind of the opposite for me of what we're trying to digest. Where I actually do hope Trevor Lee finds something of note to do in the scene. Whatever that means at this point in the game. I don't know what that necessarily means in 2024, but. I like Luke Jacobs. I think he's still finding his distinct personality to go with the stuff he does. Right? I think to my eye anyway, I don't watch as closely, but I thought the match was good, and I thought in terms of mechanically and physically, I thought it was probably the best match on the show. To be honest, I slightly struggle because it's like this is second from last, and you've seen a lot of the content before, right? So that's the only thing I would say. But I like the match for sure.
Yeah, and obviously you're with us in the Luke Jacobs fan club, JP. Like to that point, I'm totally with you in that. Like I think because the two of them were so young when they started the breakthrough, and it was immediately apparent just seeing them in Future Shock and elsewhere. It was like, all right, you're going to be something. You've almost got to have like a certain age and a maturity behind you to carry yourself in the way that the way they wrestle would fit as a gimmick. So yeah, that's kind of how it's felt. But I do think he's putting it together a little bit for me, JP now.
Controversial opinion, is he getting a bit Gunter-esque in that I liked a slightly bigger Luke Jacobs?
He's very lean. I was wondering.
I was like, okay, this reminds me of how he ended up challenging for the what was it, the cruiserweight belt in.
He was cruiserweight champion at the same time he was Atlas champion in Progress, wasn't it? It's like one of these things doesn't make sense.
How's that work?
Oh well.
But that might just be. I mean, in some ways though, like I'm kind of fine with that. Funny enough, I don't see him winning the belt at Copper Box. I think this might be where we see Michael Oku do something a bit naughty in order to retain it. Which, if that is the case, like again, I'm absolutely fine with it because I think there's legs in it. It's the kind of it's the common sense. Right there. But he's been like, and I think the thing with Luke Jacobs is I can't dislike him because we saw him when he was 17 wrestling in like Future Shock. And it was the match against Chris Ridgway that he had. And I know that's obviously the guy who's helped train him and whatnot, but like it was like Jesus Christ, 17. He's a prodigious talent. Last time I felt that way about a 17-year-old, like seeing him live, was when Bukayo Saka was playing left back for Arsenal, and I was like, Jesus, like this, and then they played him right wing, and it was like fucking brilliant. He can do everything, this bloke. And so, I think. For Luke Jacobs, it was even his involvement in the main event was probably the thing I was like slightly less keen on because it felt like, well, we kind of got to have him get involved in order to make sure that we put some focus on it. So from a logical perspective,
I liked him thinking about MJF as well, though. Like that you didn't mention that we talked the match because logically, of course, he wouldn't want MJF to win. He'd want Oku to win because then there's another belt there for him to go to. I like that. I like that little attention to detail.
Note though, we did see Connor Mills in the pub, and he was on crutches. So, like, either he was absolutely selling it, but he didn't seem to be. He seemed to be like, no,
he's a man of fine taste. He's modelled himself right now after like Kenta and mid 2000s ROH, and I'm loving every bit of it. He's my one to watch for this year. Big fan. Yeah, hopefully he's all right. But yeah, I mean, it was a solid enough like mid card, I thought. And again, as we've said a few times, the story of the show was it was about MJF sold the tickets. It was about sending everybody home happy with that. Sent us all home happy with the Ospreay coming out and being back in Rev Pro, closing the loop on the story with obviously Oku and Amir as well because it was Amir he saved at the end as well. And you can't say anybody left you know, without a smile on the face, who'd enjoyed it, but more to the point, with a massive focus now on both All In for AEW and Copperbox for Rev Pro. So it was job done altogether. It was one of the. It's weird. None of those individual matches we've kind of just broke down. I was doing somersaults about, but as an overall experience, it was one of the best heel hall shows I've been to. If that makes any sense.
Yeah. There's been a lot of time. I mean, even the tag match, which we've not talked about, it was fine. But then there was a lot of stuff that it wasn't. It was. Okay. They were all like 10 minutes long. There was just a string of 10-minute long matches, which it goes to the point you said earlier on, Joe, where because of the heat, it was like, Jesus Christ, should we take down some of the time on this? Do you lose anything by that? No. I think if you set people up with we'll be finished for 8. Oh, hang on a minute, it's 7:30. And you're like, fucking get in. That's cracking work, lads. That's definitely the way forward. I'm a less is more kind of person, as we spoke about in the pre-show about films. Like, give me. I didn't think A Quiet Place Day 1 was a great film, but it was an hour and 40 minutes, which I did like that a lot.
Yeah, I think the Fatal 4-Way Tag was actually the match I remember commenting on it about, like, you know, because when I see those matches, just to be completely transparent, I dread those matches in some level because it's just I know exactly what it's going to be, and with respect to the talent who are all working incredibly hard, but it's like, and when it ended, when it did, I said the thing I'd say is it didn't overstay its welcome. Everyone did their stuff and they got out of there, and there's always room for that on an undercard, right? Not every match needs to extend into its third, and you know, like it's. So I thought that was a compliment to it at least, and I think the timings of the matches was a positive for the show.
Definitely, and I'm glad Sunshine Machine is still together. In all seriousness, I want to see that team be a big deal, and that story continues as well. So definitely fifth for me, unless there's anything else. I mean, are you going to be at the Copperbox, Joe? Are you doing that on top of All In?
I will not be. No, I don't think I've got in me. I think Wembley. It's like a commitment of energy and emotion. I don't know if I can attach with something else. It's but yeah, I think I'll probably. It was certainly an experience that, you know, my relationship with these shows at this point is very much, but case by case. If there's an attraction that intrigues me, I'll be there right away. I'm not someone, and I'm not sure I'll ever be someone that's like, want to see what's up next for, you know, insert name. It's just not my taste personally. But I mean, Sunshine Machine, I'm just throwing it out there, guys. I know you're not as bullish on the famed FTR as I am, but I don't know if you heard, Cash Wheeler wants to wrestle Sunshine Machine. Yeah. I mean, that'd be a nice occasion at York Hall, wouldn't it? That'd be a fun time, wouldn't it? I'm just saying, I'm just throwing things out there. I don't know.
Love to see it.
Set of belts they haven't got.
Yeah, there you go. That's always interesting, right?
That would be if you could get them then after that, and they're not doing much else. They want to come over to the UK to tick that box. Then it absolutely makes sense. I mean, I think we're going to be getting some sort of angle with them at the Copper Box as well, and we'll talk about it in terms of the previews for next week for All In. In
broad strokes, though, as well, it's like, you know, Oku obviously is going to get asked, is there interest in AEW? And I thought he answered the question when he talked to Steph quite well in that. I think he'd mentioned earlier on, I've heard they've got quite a bloated roster, so we'll see. It's like, at least Michael knows he's tuned in. But he was like, you know, obviously, you know, I'm willing to do something. There's a long line of wrestlers who are looking at Cardiff next week and who are looking at All In about getting bookings. But I wouldn't hate seeing Sunshine Machine in a spot like that. I wouldn't. Subculture's the obvious one, isn't it, JP? Obviously, if everyone's fit and healthy, you'd want to see them in that role as well. But yeah, I'll be absolutely up for that. But yeah, there we go. It was, like I say, good to meet everyone. Good to meet you, Joe. Good to see SP3, Mikey in the chat there. Yeah, obviously he was there as well. Good to say hello to him. So yeah, thanks to everybody we saw. We had a good couple of pints afterwards as well, didn't we, JP? And then
we did.
Off into the night as we talked about on the pre-show. And yeah, we'll be doing more of that on All In weekend. We'll be at the Copper Box. We'll be at Wembley. We learned our mistake from last year, Joe. We did our live show the day of Wembley and then sat there for 6 hours or however long the pay-per-view went, and then did an after party with karaoke. I don't know if the karaoke would hit the Bryan Danielson scale or not, but we won't be doing that this year. It's All In day. It's just All In. That's it. I'm not doing anything else. I'm sleeping in, and I'm going to Wembley. That's my plan.
Yeah. By the time
I'd like to go to that. Yeah.
By the time the Wembley card ended, I could have told you what was on it. I think by the time that they got done with Cole and MJF, I was going, has Punk wrestled yet? Has he wrestled?
Best match on the card, that mate. Come on, 5 stars.
Damn right it was, brother.
3.5. Bollocks. Oh. Anyway, I don't get mad about those ratings, but that one.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of which, we should talk some other subjects. If you're good to stick around, Joe, got a bit of AEW.
Absolutely,
AEW to talk. Good man. Well, What do we make of the All In build, JP? We'll start there. Danielson's been on tour trying to convince us all. He might well be retiring coming out of All In with mixed results, I would say. The build to this one. We talked a bit of Dynamite on the weekend show. Meltzer's been trying to fill in the blanks on what the rest of the All In card might be. Possibly we might be heading towards a 3-way with, again, I'd take Sunshine Machine, Young Bucks, FTR, and the Acclaimed. Apparently, is going to get added to the cards. Speaking of Big Dave, he was almost crying into his chips, worried that Okada might not get a big match on the show. Obviously, there's Okada and Claudio looks to be the direction now, so you can add that in it as well, JP. But yeah, what have you made of the builders? We start to get more of a flesh card out, although I say that officially we're still kind of where we were.
I think it's if you think of it in terms of, I liked the idea that we knew the directions we're going towards All In. I just happen to think that the last couple of bits of TV have been very kind of by the numbers. And I was thinking of it back to like my day job. And I was thinking, when you're teaching, you have to do a scheme of work. And what that requires you to do is each and every week, you have to plan out specifically what are you going to do? What's the homework you're going to set? Where do you want them to be for this? And it's almost like they've tried to fit in a build of sort of 8 weeks or so into 4, and they've thought, oh shit, we've just got to go over the same stuff again. So we've seen kind of like repetition of angles. And I know we spoke about it on the weekend show with Mercedes Moné and Britt Baker and stuff, and it's like, Jesus Christ, I'd sooner just not have them on the telly if you've got nothing to actually do for them as well. And I think that is part of like, I say it's not an issue, because I'm just happy that they've built towards the card and they're treating it as a super card, as they should have done, which was like the big lesson from last year. And I happen to think it might have well have had an effect of why we're going to probably end up with 50,000 people as opposed to 80,000 people. That like they wanted the experience of Wembley and seeing a big wrestling event at Wembley, and there was no guarantees that we were ever going to get any WWE pay-per-view from there anytime soon. So this is kind of like where we are. My only fear is, and this is going from like what Dave has said, is that we're adding on a load of matches. And I thought when I added on the Casino Gauntlet, I was like, oh, good. We'll get a load of entrances. We'll get a load of lads there. It's a perfect way to open up the show. And what we can end up doing is it will kind of take out a lot of that clutter, because you'll just put all the people into the one match, and then that's absolutely fine. It'll work from there. And instead, like you say, we've got Okada versus Claudio, which would have at one point, I would have been really excited about that. But now I'm a bit like, like if that's going to end up being the case. Are we going to end up with Jeff Jarrett versus Hangman Page, which I will kind of love. But then there's part of me going, you do have All Out. You can save some stuff, believe it or not, because you've built the bigger stuff, the most important stuff around the major titles. You've done that job of getting to that place. And so you can kind of almost like leave it there. But it's probably not helped that the last couple of weeks of Dynamite and Collision haven't had those kind of like big angles like the Mariah May, Tony Storm angle or the MJF turn. We haven't had stuff like that in the meantime, or even the Owen finals, which added a little bit of like, because we thought it might not be Daniel. We assumed it was going to be Hangman Page. So my fear is that Tony is going to revert to type and just start adding matches onto the card. And you're like, mate, you don't need to kill us all before we get to that main event, which is going to go long anyway, along with MJF Ospreay, obviously the stuff that really needs the time, by throwing in extra matches that you could just hang on for a month. And Jeff Jarrett, Hangman Page would be fine to do it bloody All Out. We'd be all right with that, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
Oh. And that pre-show match, what the fuck is that about? Just to throw that in there as well. Like, that is just a disgrace. Stokely Hathaway and Chris Statlander versus Willow Nightingale and Tomohiro Ishii. That's just fucking around with people and just like, put a match together. Shits and giggles. No, don't need that at all.
Have we lost Benno, or have I lost him? I can't tell. Have we both lost him?
I don't
There
know.
we
Is he
go.
on mute? There
I
he
thought
is.
I was being ignored. I get it now. There we go. I'm on mute. That's the catchphrase over there, Joe. I enjoyed that rad, JP. Sorry. Sorry to take over. Got to jump in first and say it looks like, and I don't know who this bloke is, Joe, someone called Ibu of WrestlePurists. Apparently he's reporting that Swerve Hangman is the match at All Out.
Well,
so
he's full of shit. He doesn't know.
No sources, doesn't know anything.
How would he know?
Yeah. I will say, and this is definitely not secondhand stuff, but I'm not sure those matches we mentioned are going to be on Wembley, fellas. I must say. I'm not
I
sure.
could see them being all-out matches.
I think one of them is going to be in Cardiff. I think. Could be wrong. This may or may not be tied to the gentleman whose name was just on the screen by a tweet. I don't know.
There'd be room to do that, though. It would make sense, wouldn't it? Like, rather than overstuff All In, put a couple, give people their moment, but in Cardiff in the lead-in front of what will be a hot crowd.
The debate's going to be, if I am correct in my guess / secondhand scoop, then Claudio and Okada, as someone who's going to Wembley, I've got to be honest, guy, I'm completely fine with that just being a TV main event. I don't really want to watch that match at Wembley Stadium. That's just me, you know.
No.
But if someone said the argument, you signed Kazuchika Okada, the one occasion he's perfect for is the bit. I go, yeah, you're right. So I'm kind of I'm torn in that way, and I'm that way with a lot of this show, to be honest. Like, I think every time I read an argument about why Hangman should be facing Swerve at Wembley. A large part of I read it and kind of go, you're probably right. And then I think to myself, but I am going to this show. And I would actually rather hear the final countdown and watch Bryan Daniels. So I'm really kind of torn on a lot of it. I think to the point, I agree completely. They've done a much better job of emphasizing this as the big show, which wasn't honestly a catastrophe last year, right? There was the infamous Punk promo where he said, is anyone going to talk about Wembley Stadium?
The Americans won't hear it, though, mate. You would fight that same battle as us. Like, the What Culture lads, we were getting so much grief for just saying difficult. No, lads, you don't understand. It's Wembley. It's a big deal. Like, I think people get that now.
200,000 of the bastards still bought the pay-per-view, though, didn't they?
That's true.
So they still stumped up for a few quid, didn't they? When push came to bloody shove, they thought it was important enough then. No, Chicago has to have all the goods.
If it helps, I think most people that are being fair have come around to the reality that there was a lot of truth to what we were saying, especially about the multi-man stuff being way overdone on because remember, like, the famous example being the Omega 6-man, which, with respect to Dave's rating, no one remembers that match as a Wembley match. And it was Kenny Omega at Wembley Stadium, man. Like, that was an error. So, yeah, I think they've done a better job with that. I think the main stuff, I think Mariah and Tony have done a great job. Are they going in circles a little bit now? Yeah, but they've done a great job. I really don't have many complaints there. Swerve and Dragon it's fascinating because I like the performances, but it's incredibly AEW in the sense that it's like they're selling arguably the greatest wrestler ever in a title versus career match. But they're doing it in a way that is sort of more complicated than the simplest stipulation of all, which is title versus career. And, Jim Ross and bless Jim Ross, but he's talking about, because it made the TV, they could have cut it out. He says that line, right? Like, it feels like Bryan might retire, win, lose, or draw.
Yeah.
He's like, does it? I thought he was trying to be the world champion. It's just, it's a strange, that one's strange. I think Swerve, look, I have some complaints about some of Swerve's matches occasionally, honestly, increasingly less so. The way he carries himself, credit to him. He feels like the world champion to me. And that wasn't the case initially. So huge props to him. I don't know. I like his performance. Brian's Brian, but it feels like they could be a lot more clear with what they're actually selling here. This is a pretty big deal. It's a big one.
It's one of those ones where, and I agree with it on Swerve, like I would say big time. He feels like someone who heard the criticism when he first won the title, wasn't the first out on Dynamite, saved the promo for Collision, and then ever since, he feels meticulous about everything, how he's dressed, what segment he's in, when he's talking, when he's not in the show, he's Poochie, you should always be talking about me on the world champion. He's making sure those little things are happening. He is doing a fantastic job, I think, as world champion. And we keep having this conversation, it feels like, with the Bryan match, where it's like, there's still time. There's still time. We're going to get there. And I think you're right as well, Joe. I think Final Countdown's going to hit. And Brian win again, to paraphrase from JR, win, lose or draw. We're all going to feel emotional coming out of it, and after it, it's going to feel like we saw a gigantic thing, I think. But I don't know what like the level of job they're doing selling that right now. It does feel confused. Swerve's sit down with JR was good, but a little bit tonally inconsistent, and obviously, unfortunately, a lot of us were paying attention to JR as well. Yeah. Daniel, someone like you said, that line from JR stood out like a sore thumb to me. It's like, okay, well, what story are we telling here? There's a bit of confusion, like is Swerve leaning into the heel side? Should it be? Obviously, it shouldn't be Brian. But I don't know if he's doing a great job of, like, he's trying to do that meta work thing where he's doing these interviews off camera and he's being like, well, I've got some injuries and we'll see what happens, and he's trying to talk out of both sides of his mouth and trying to convince us there as well that he might lose, but it does feel a bit tonally off, I'd say.
Yeah, maybe it's just me. I kind of want just a bit more violence. Maybe that's just a thing that I have in this as well. Like, it should be. It's like, say, a simple story. It should be Danielson gunning for the title that he hasn't had, and he's being held together by duct tape. And he's going in there against an absolute killer who wants to take him out and wants the glory of, I took out the best wrestler in the world. And at times, like, I don't want to see people talking about respect and stuff like that. And Danielson's too happy for some of this stuff. Like, maybe that's just me.
But we're all Jeff fans here. We're all signed up members of that fan club. But I thought that story was going in a way. It's like Jeff's going to bring that out of him, and I guess he did to an extent, in the match itself. And that's going to set him on a path where now it's like, maybe not even I'd go that far, like violence-wise, just a seriousness and just a focus on, right, I need to be the world champion. Again, maybe it's coming. There is still time. We keep saying it. But I don't know if that story kind of went the way I would. As much as I was glad to see a Jeff main event in 2024, and that might not be a popular take, but I think we'd all be in league with that, Joe.
Yeah, absolutely. The saddest part of our kind of hesitance to believe Brian, I think he's telling a lot of truth. Honestly, now obviously he's doing Bryan Danielson things, and he puts in like these lines that he knows is going to make you think he's losing at Wembley.
Of course,
I am increasingly convinced that he is actually physically in a state where he's, I think he'll wrestle. Obviously, I think he's winning at Wembley. I think he will do the part-time thing. I'm not so sure anymore it will be at the schedule he once thought it would be. I guess I'll put it that way, and that's not like a scoop. That's just like you hear people talk about Brian. It's like it sounds like he's as beat up as we imagine, I guess would be the way to put it. So it kind of it scares me, the idea that Brian's sitting in his interviews being entirely sincere about his neck, and we're all going, "Oh, he's at it again. You won't fool me." It's like I think that's the point. But it's a strange thing, the way they've got to this, which should be a really big drawing card and a really big emotional. And I think again, I think it will get over the line, as you said. Like, Final Countdown's going to play. It's a Bryan Danielson match.
Yeah,
he'll convince us in the match. But how many times have we done that conversation? But the match will do it for us. At some point, it'd be nice if the TV helped too, right? Like, that'd be cool. So I don't know.
It's the thing that we've spoken about this as our constant criticism of Tony Khan as Booker, is that he likes to think that great match like cures all ills. And you go, well, no, a lot of the time, and I don't want to go back to SummerSlam again, but it's more than that. It's everything. It's the genesis of how a feud happens. It's the build all the way there. It's the kind of the big triumphant promo package and all of that stuff together that accumulates in this great match and a great event and the big spectacle. So it's a whole series of things. And quite often we just, like with AEW, they don't stick that side of it. Like, they'll deliver the great match because they've got the people who can deliver those kind of matches. But it's like, no, it's all these other bits as well. They need to, those other component parts they need to put together better.
Yeah, and it's not even just the match, the bell to bell of the match. What will be delivered will be the post match and all of that. That'll be done perfectly too. It's not even just there'll be a 5-star match. I think on the night, all of those things will deliver. But yeah, I'm with you. There's just something that's not sitting right about it, and maybe it's the You know, like I say, you got to pick a lane. I'm not necessarily sure I would go the personal route. I think I would, you know, as far as like a serious issue route, I would have gone maybe the route of the story to tell him. It's Brian's last chance to with the world title. But again, if you're going to tell that story, maybe they should have started earlier. Maybe Brian should have thought before he spoke in all those interviews over the last 3 years where he's like, I don't really want to be world champion, lads. Don't really fancy it. Sounds like a lot of work. I'm all right. I'll just mess around in the undercard with Wheeler Yuta. It's sound. There's been maybe too much of that that's played on our brains, and we haven't had enough time to turn the tide, and make that feel like a real thing that we should be invested in.
Yeah, and even as just direct and as specific as the deal with Ospreay, the whole point of that they're still using is that Will Ospreay like nearly killed Bryan Danielson and is terrified to ever pull the trigger again on the move. And it's like Danielson was back. Danielson hasn't even spoke on this. Like he hasn't. And like again, these are things.
He's only off for 2 weeks.
Exactly, and these are things that you feel you get frustrated talking about them because at some point you kind of have to say to yourself, just for your own sense of, you have to be like, it's fine, the match, but it does add up. That stuff does add up because it doesn't make sense why Danielson is like talking with the severity he talks unless you have a deep understanding of how many injuries he's had. But that story is like, it's kind of there. He was back 2 weeks later and did an Anarchy in the Arena match. It's not, I don't know, man. I guess I'm saying spell it out, but at some level, that's part of wrestling TV, isn't it? Like,
absolutely.
I don't know.
Signposting and making things feel important.
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose that's the main. What's your overall feeling on it as like an overall show, Joe? Are you excited? You're more excited than you were last year around obviously we talked about the build and everything. Is there?
Even though being analytical, I think it's much stronger than last year, and I think it will be a better show than last year. I can't say I'm more excited just because last year had Punk and Joe, which they had 1,000,001 issues in itself, and as much as Punk was the guy who had the line about,
I wish someone talked about him.
Right, well, yeah. But even beyond those ones, right? Like, do you remember the build to that where Punk had like 5 feuds and just kind of picked one at the last minute? I mean, that would be the one.
Ricky Starks, Jay White, all of that.
Yeah, it was. So there was, there was issues that, but at the end of the day, I knew I'm going to see Samoa Joe and CM Punk at Wembley. That alone was a huge part of the excitement for me. So as a fan, lesser excited. Also, the novelty, right? We have to be honest. There's a novelty to last year that you can't. But I will say, as much as I just, got very frustrated about it, I do think they've done a much better job. I think it will actually be a much better show, to be honest. I think it will be a show that holds up historically far better. I think a lot of All In's appeal, the original, not the original, but last year's All In was that novelty, to be honest. I think there'll be a lot more matches on this, or a few more at least, that people go back to as classics. So I'm mostly positive, believe it or not. It didn't come across in this segment, I promise.
I'm feeling the same way. It's finally dawned on me. It's coming, literally next week, which is mad. It's next week.
That's terrifying.
And I'm looking forward to the weekend as a whole for kind of that overall reason. And the thing that's kind of worried me, it's like the amount of talk you hear from people. It's like, could also be the last one. It could be. And we'll be gutted then. Somebody mentioned that to me and was like, obviously there's the Texas Stadium story, which the saying is unrelated, but you can't help but look at, and the possibility of, with the numbers being down, whether they do come back. And it did bring out an emotional reaction. Maybe I was like, but that's our thing. No, surely there'll be one next year. So clearly I'm still attached to it, and I want to be there, obviously, on the day. And as much as I'm out about stadium wrestling, I want to be there again, next year as well. But I don't know if you think there's anything to that, lads.
I think it's how it looks and comes across. If it is in the way where it's got a massive Taylor Swift sponsored screen going on in the background, they've managed to borrow off her and say, well, we'll put this away. You just leave it up for an extra day. Then that would be, and it looks like the other 3/4 of the stadium are relatively packed. Then I think the ticket stuff will mean a lot less because it'll look spectacular and it'll have that kind of feel to it as well. We've seen this with another stadium show that happened recently with a very similar kind of attendance. It's like you can make this stuff look really good. Whereas last year, and it's fine having those ground walkways as long as they feel like a bigger deal. But I was sat on the floor last year, so I could see bugger all of people coming out. Whereas this year I won't be. I'll be up in whatever the cheapest possible seats are available at the time. So I'm much more excited about this as a card I think if the spectacle is good, then they should stick with it. If they leave and they decide to go somewhere else, it's like, what a missed opportunity you had to have the UK as a massive base for you, because there isn't going to be anything bigger. There's no bigger stadiums in the country. There's nowhere else that they're going to be able to go to. Like everywhere else is down from Wembley.
Yeah.
So do they think to themselves, right, there is enough people who are interested in going to this show? They're still doing 6 million gate or whatever for this. So there's still a financial incentive for them to be doing it. It's just if they don't go there, they're just opening it up for WWE to run a show in Wembley, and then it becomes their venue, and then it becomes all about them. And you just think you let this slip through your grasp. It feels like the conversation we're having about Sadiq Khan and the comically small belt that he was holding up a couple of weeks ago. But that's like there was a point in time where after that first show, they should have been going saying like, this is going to be like a big deal. This is going to be like a new base, and we're going to make a real push for primarily UK and Irish fans, but also like European fans to be able to come to this show. And it'll be a massive deal every year. And they've delivered with it in terms of the card for what they could do. I mean, I think the only other big match they would have had on there is like a Mega Okada. I don't even know how that would have really fitted in. But instead, if they go somewhere else, it's going to feel like a downward step.
Yeah. I think one of the big misses, and we all probably talked about this at the time, but, you know, while we're talking kind of All In as a brand, All In London in particular.
Yeah.
The big miss to me was the way they didn't build like fan community elements around the show. Like if you go to WrestleMania, you can't turn left or right. But there was nothing. No, and there's that one thing they did.
Toronto, mate. There was a little shop. There was like stalls. It was you couldn't escape it. If WWE were in town, like you knew.
That's the stuff that's like the difference between the two companies. It's less fun to talk about because ultimately I don't really care. Like it's not like it's not as fun as about the booking or the match, right? But if we're being honest, that's where the actual differences lie, right? It's the packaging of stuff. It's the marketing of stuff. I mean, Wembley Stadium, they sold 80,000 tickets, and most people had no awareness the event was taking place.
No.
That's insane.
Doesn't know. Clearly doesn't know. His team hadn't told them. Like, it's like, one for free, mate. It's right there.
It's just they had an opportunity, I feel like, to take over the city with that, like as much as one can with London. But it's I don't know. That kind of baffles me, and it doesn't seem like it's going to change, right? It seems like they're just going to do one shot in Cardiff and then roll into London and do the show. Like.
With a bold assumption that Cardiff show is going to eventually sell out. I still think we'll get there, as we keep saying.
That's absurd.
That's a story, isn't it? Could you even guess 2 years ago, Joe? Oh, Dynamite debut in the UK isn't going to sell out, or not immediately, because I think it probably will. But it's proper like trundling along, taking its time to
terrible.
Get there.
Like I get it, the gate's a priority, but that show should be selling out immediately. I'm sorry, it should be. It's just. It's a shame. I don't know. I understand it's a business and so on and so forth. I'm sure we sent some graphs explaining it to me, but it's just like it's not a big building. It's a great building for wrestling. I was there for the house show WWE run earlier this year. I mean, it was rocking, and the height, like everyone's got a perfect view of the ring. It's great, but it's like that exactly. It's not like a sexy place to run, right? Like it's not like it's got much allure.
I looked at it, it was like a 4-hour drive for me. It's like it'd take longer to get there than London.
Exactly. Which is different. If they say that All In 2 was Millennium Stadium, we would approach that trip differently because it would be the big show. For those of us that are going to All In, it's now like, so now I have to do this like secondary trip.
Get those days off work. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was
in a completely different direction.
Yeah, and the ticket prices are too high, and I don't know, man. Sometimes you've got to go out your own way, right?
It'd be like they run Rampage the week after and go, we'll do it in Ipswich, just to make you just travel around the place. Take you to weird places. Like,
I'd go to Ipswich for the but it's like we said on the weekend show, JP. Like the biggest thing for me is like when a promotion that's hot, like WWE in Scotland, sells those massively inflated tickets. We can complain about it as fans, but at the end of the day, if they sell, they sell. And it appears they did. Gareth would question that, but it appears they did, so you can't have a go. In this case, they had those high prices and they didn't sell, and they massively overestimated what they could charge for the show. And I think they are climbing down, and we are seeing cheaper tickets. But yeah, it was a lesson learned. When you're not hot, you're not hot. And it's, we're going to be doing a post-mortem, I think, on Wembley. Even if it does 55,000, it's still going to be a conversation. What was the difference this year? Why did that Cardiff, show struggle so hard to just get to the point of a sellout in a 4,000-seater arena? Like, these aren't conversations we should be happening, but there we go. That's kind of all in and an all out season. And there's another season going on as well. We should talk, lads. So this isn't a bit, Joe. We just keep reverting back to WrestlePurists because there's news breaking apparently at every second over on that channel on YouTube. Nobody leave, watch us instead. No, they do great stuff over there. Gigantic fan. But yeah, Ibu's at it, and we are hearing some different pieces on WWE that we can get into. We're also seeing with the contract season we're up to at the minute. Obviously, Daniel Garcia's future's a conversation we can have. Apparently, he's conflicted on which direction he's gonna go. Penta, I did see Ibu tweet about how much he loves those luchadors. They can be messy, the lads. Apparently, Penta is. It has been reported he's going to be in Orlando this week, and apparently that is legitimate, but he does have a booking in Mexico this Thursday. Apparently he's trying to quiet reports that are out there right now to try and make sure the Phoenix can get a clean exit from AEW. Like, any theories on what's going on here, JP, with the lads, where they are ultimately going to end up?
They're certainly less conflicted, is what I would say, than what Daniel Garcia is at this point. Certainly Penta as well. I mean, they're off.
They're done.
There's they're done, and they're going. And like, it's a point we've raised several times whenever we've covered this story. Like, they should be gone. They've hit their ceiling for what AEW thinks they're going to achieve, and there isn't anywhere else they're going to go. There isn't some big world title push happening for Phoenix. There isn't some even big push of them as tag team stars. We've had that. It was come and gone. It was that match against the Young Bucks in the cage that they had and everything else. And it feels like they're going there. And like you say, like, what were they going to be doing at Wembley? They're going to be involved in the trios match. That's what they were going to be up to. And they weren't going to be doing anything else of any particular substance. So they should be going. I mean, yeah, they'll quiet it down because there's effectively non-disclosure stuff that they have to always think about. And that's going to have to be like the big deal. Okay. And that's going to have to be the thing that they need to take into consideration, as they can't say a word about this, as with all wrestlers. So I personally think that they're off. I mean, the Daniel Garcia one, the fact he's even saying he's conflicted, it means he can be convinced. And then it comes down to how much the WWE want him. How much are they going to like really push the boat out in order to get him? Are they going to, I mean, I think it's inevitable for him, whereas Penta, by all accounts, for Penta and Phoenix, they've said that they don't want to go to NXT, that, they want to be going in on the main roster. I think for Daniel Garcia, him going to NXT is absolutely inevitable, but I don't think that's a bad place. Because I think there's a thing where if he went there, it'll be like, okay, we need to define who your character is at this point. And contrary to what Chris Jericho thinks, it has to be more than a dance. That can't be the be-all and end-all of your character. And go, hey, look, you're a sports entertainer now. No, it takes a bit more effort than that, mate. And I think that's like the fact that probably comes down to a like, is there a clearly defined plan for what they're going to do with him in NXT? And he'll have a look at the minute and he'll see like an Ethan Page who was well below him on the totem pole, and see NXT champion. He'll be the champion heading into when they're on CW and they're in front of like a pretty packed all-state arena, and when they're in St. Louis, Missouri, it's going to be him who's on there as the champion. It's like, bloody hellfire. Like, there is any stigma they thought they might have had from coming from AEW into WWE. This is not Vince McMahon's WWE, where he would have gone out of his way to punish them for the entirety of their contract in order to just establish some weird point, because that's how that creepy bastard worked. Instead, I think it's going to be a case of, no, actually, we're going to substantially get behind you, because they can take those kind of risks in NXT. And I happen to think it's a risk he should very much take.
Any theories on it, Joe? Did I ask where people where they should land?
This legitimately may be the funniest position I've ever been on a show, because it's like there's two stories that I feel hilariously attached to.
Yeah.
But no, I think the Lucha Bros deal is one of those that shocks you and then makes immediate sense as soon as you actually think about it. For all the reasons JP mapped, and also we were just talking about how WWE, market and package things. Think what you will of these matches in 2024. Penta is going to sell so much merchandise up there. Like, it's going to be crazy. I mean, AEW are hesitant to make action figures for anyone, and they even got like 4 Pentas out there. Like, he's money. Like, his look is amazing, and his matches, honestly, at this point, will probably fit in. I worry about Phoenix somewhat in the sense that I could see some of the agents up there really struggling with Ray Phoenix, to be honest with you. Right. He kind of marches the beat of his own drum, and I think the guys in AEW are probably more forgiving of that than a Michael Hayes, God forbid, would be. So that's one thing. And also I always, Ray's body has been, let's be real, he's had a lot of injuries, which, is what it is. So Phoenix, I'm like, Pentas, I mean, he should be like desperate again, which apparently he is. Clearly,
seems that way.
So that one makes sense as soon as you think about it. The Garcia one is like, I don't know. I honestly don't know, and I know that's not the good answer for a podcast. It's not the right answer. Right? It's not good audio. I could be convinced in either direction with a single conversation, much like I think he could. I think there is a lot to be said for. If in an ideal world, if you think of what the promotion should be, I think there's a very easy argument to make that he fits better in AEW.
Right.
The issue is this is not an ideal world, and he's had stop-start pushes. NXT is a great spot for him. I mean, it is a great spot for him. They have major vacancies and need guys to push. He's not only a guy who's got TV polish, which clearly they're looking for, Sean Spears and Ethan Page, clearly. But he's young. It feels like he would fit and actually get over with the demo they want for that show. He's not so deep in his TV run that he's not going to be coachable. I think he'd be a great fit in that regard. On a personal level, I think there's still things for him to develop and add in, ring, and out. I think Daniel Garcia is a great talent, but sure, I think he could learn stuff from Fit Finley. Sure. I think it would be foolish to think otherwise. Obviously, there are some things you'd have to avoid learning. There's some habits in the other way, but you get my point.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I love the NXT fit for him. The issue with the NXT fit is it comes with the sequel of then he goes up.
Yeah.
And I just don't know what that looks like. That doesn't mean he can't do it. I think he certainly can. And if he was to have a big NXT run, you presume it would position him well. But let's be honest, Carmelo Hayes had a big NXT run, and I think he's doing okay, but it's not like he's, it's the main roster's different. Bron and Carmelo have given you an immediate example of that, even in this era. So I'm really torn. The NXT part is very attractive. The main roster part feels like a bit of a roll of the dice. The only thing I would say in favor of rolling that dice, even if gun to my head, I think I'd lean AEW. Thing I would say is he's very young. Worst case scenario, he has a great NXT run and he gets, wasted on the main roster. He'd be leaving at 29, 30? And the landscape could be different. Then maybe he could do some stuff in Japan. Maybe he could do stuff here, there, and there. So I'm very, very torn, as you can tell. I'm all over the place on this one because it's just hard, I think.
I think that's, for me, that's the right take because I think we've built an audience, JP, of mostly, other than, some of the people Matty might have brought to our door who prefer AEW as a product, prefer that type of wrestling, prefer that style for a wrestler like Daniel Garcia, and I can't disagree with that, stylistically. Of course, AEW is a better fit for Daniel Garcia as a wrestler and the type of wrestler he seems to want to be. But also, you got to call a spade, and the reality of what Daniel Garcia has been doing in AEW is there to see. You can say, and I think I agree, NXT is a gamble. WWE more so a gamble, as you said, Joe. But it's a gamble. But AEW is known. We know how they book Daniel Garcia. We know the stop-start nature of the different pushes he'd have. We know he's struggled to kind of get a consistent foot on the roster. That's known as something that's gone wrong, and I think there are people out there who would just immediately dismiss the idea that he could be a success in NXT or be a success in the WWE system. But maybe it's just the gambler in me. I would, if I was in his shoes, I almost lean that way because it's the unknown and because it's not crazy to think that he could end up, doing well in NXT, definitely, and potentially doing well in WWE. Like the spike push we always talk about, JP. That's a thing, What, like you said, Joe, Sean Spears is getting a push, or at least a placement on TV. Ethan Page is the NXT champion. Like it's a different world to what what this conversation would have been 2 years ago.
For sure. And the main roster guys, a lot of those guys aren't getting younger, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, you jump 2 years down the time. 2 years may sound like a long time for him to be in NXT, but they're a TV show now, so it's slightly different. It's like some of those guys aren't going to be around in 2 years, man. They're just not. So and the biggest concern I have about Daniel in AEW, I think it's apparent that Tony Khan sees value in Daniel Garcia, right? I think that's apparent even with his many creative, woes. I think that's more. Other factors we'll leave for another day. The concern I have is, while I think he sees value in him, I'm not sure Tony Khan gets Daniel Garcia. That's not to say Shawn Michaels would. However, the Daniel Garcia that we saw before he went away here for this last little bit, I thought was like entirely at odds with who that dude should be on TV show.
Absolutely.
His presentation to me before they did the angle is like what I would present like a Wheeler Yuta like. Like his gimmick was like he tries hard and he gives it the best he's got, and he bless Danny, he tries his best. And it's like, I don't know. I think Daniel Garcia could actually be kind of cool. I think he should be a cocky, kind of sees himself as a prodigy. I think they should do a better job of framing what kind of style of wrestler is. Which, by the way, that is such a lost art. I apologize for going off the rails here, but
no.
Go back and listen to the way the WWF announcers would call Bret Hart's matches. And the way they would get over why he's a great wrestler. Daniel Garcia's style should be like, we should get beat over the head with what he's good at inside the ropes, right? Like Red Death and this, like, he's this hybrid on the mat and so on and so forth. And instead, he became like underdog who's defiant. Man, I just didn't get that. So that would concern me a little bit. Now, hopefully, obviously, Daddy Magic had that line about Red Death will be coming back, not Daniel Garcia. Hopefully that would be a change if he did resign and returned. I found that to be a little weird this year. The way they presented him, I thought was strange. It was like a charity case at times, It was odd.
Exactly, yeah. And that keeps happening. Like, you had that whole thing about he was rising up against Jericho, and then that story never played off. Yeah. It basically became Sammy Guevara's story instead. And then we went back to it again. You're absolutely right. Instead of him being cool and young, which he is, good looking young lad who's got that pedigree. Instead, he's like, please give me a chance, like every other young wrestler on the roster. He's never been properly defined. Like I've been a big, obviously the ROH conversation is a different one as to what that is, but I was arguing at the start of that, he could take over. That could be his little company where he's this badass on top who I don't even know what it looks like, but he finds a lane and a personality type that fits him that becomes the new Daniel Garcia, because he's never quite found that footing in AEW, and I almost think there's more chance of that in NXT. There's also a chance of it going, to shit. Same with the Lucha Brothers. For every, the marketing, they're going to sell masks, they're going to, Penta and his catchphrases and all of that is just, money printing with WWE right now, and the way they've gotten over and Jey Uso and all of that other stuff. It's it's going to be catnip to them. But there's also the possibility of Triple H books them like he's booked a lot of the other Hispanic talent. It's a risk, and the same for Daniel Garcia. It could go one way, it could go the other way. But again, if I was him, I'd just be tempted by that possibility of a fresh coat of paint.
Things can go. It's difficult as well.
See why you're struggling, you can see it. Yeah.
Trying to predict what will happen over the next couple of years in AEW, even post TV deal, it's still a very difficult thing to do, isn't it? And it's about, do you leave the challenger brand where there's potentially more upside for what is the security and guarantee, and then even if his WWE run doesn't work out in terms of him being like a top line star, he could leave, and there's still places that he would be able to go to. It's whether or not is this his right moment to enter into that NXT/WWE system, and that's only really he is going to be able to know that, because he's the one who's obviously privy to the conversation. So it is a difficult one. And like you say, I mean, I've spoken about he should go. I, like you, Joe, I could be very easily convinced.
Yeah.
No, this is why he should stay. Because there is legitimate debate you can have about them.
Yeah.
Whereas the Lucha Brothers, it doesn't feel like that debate is there. It feels like that ship has sailed.
They shouldn't have been defined as a tag team in a trios act. They should have both been bigger single stars.
Sure.
Your mileage might vary on where that landed.
You're right, yeah.
They've been defined as a certain thing, and that's not changing. Like,
what was the deal they did where they brought, they did the whole Death Triangle back together thing? It's like, come on, man.
Alex Apprentice isn't getting a call here, by the way. But it's notable. There's no conversation here about whether that might happen.
Don't get me started.
It's the same as Garcia, though, isn't it? Garcia should be a cool young guy like you aspire to be. Penta and Phoenix, their gimmick writes itself. Why is there a fucking nerd in a vampire outfit following them around? It's
the big thing, and I think we're going to see more and more of this. And I think this is the actual challenge ahead of AEW. Producing a good wrestling show every week, honestly, even on its down weeks, there's good action, right? It's a fine wrestling. I enjoy it most weeks. I have no real issue. The big thing is they need to convince the audience, and in terms of bidding wars and such, the wrestlers themselves, that there is actually a plan in terms of getting guys across. I mentioned 2 hours ago, maybe, we talked about MJF, and I said he's the one guy, or one of the few guys, who has got himself across that bridge from they're a fun guy on the card to he's a main eventer. There's a couple of them. I think Swerve's done it now too. Hopefully. We'll see what happens with Swerve post-title reign, because I always worry about those things. But, I mean, there is 1,000,001 young guys that are just they have a match with a top guy. They look really good. They shake hands afterwards. We all do our tweets about they're next up, and then they're not next up. Yeah. And trust me, the talent notices.
Yep.
They feel it too.
Yeah. I've always said that there's a lack of just roster structure in AEW, and the idea of you could move up in everyone's EWR game. You had a lower mid card and you had an upper mid card. AEW is a mid card. It's always
and it's barely even defined as a mid card, because they very seldom will have actual mid card matches. They just have guys that lose to the top guys.
The ROH guys, basically. Yeah. There's that hierarchy. Absolutely, playing for all to see.
Mm-hmm,
well, that's kind of Garcia and Lucha Brothers, and obviously, might get more news on that. I had down as contract season as well. Randy Orton's re-signed for a long-term deal. I mean, we knew that was coming.
Water is wet, sky is blue. That bloke.
There you go. He wasn't
going anywhere.
To AEW. I suppose, a couple of other quick minor AEW notes before we move on to that stuff. Yeah, Tony Khan's been teasing the major announcements. Imagine a TV deal is incoming. Wonder if he'll try and do it at Wembley or post Wembley. JP, maybe that's coming. I had that down. I had the MJF and Britt Baker thing down as a minor news story. Does anyone want to talk about it? I don't care.
I certainly don't.
I'm over it. That's how you ended up in that position on Saturday, Sunday. But MJF's people don't get on in work. I'm looking forward to the match. That's the story, and absolutely, I'm not really keen to talk that one today unless you are, JP. And the only other AEW thing I had was Collision happened. I saw you were on the timeline today, Joe. Big into you're a big collider these days, and with the Arlington residency.
Yeah. I mean, you have to keep up appearances with these things, don't you? You have to. People notice otherwise. I enjoy. Collision is the show that I most enjoy. Just actually sincerely sitting down and watching as a wrestling show, because its tone is that kind of, how you watch a WCW Saturday night and the tone is basically, this is kind of boring, but you can spend some hours with Nigel and Tony and enjoy yourself, and that's the way I treat it. Is it interesting? Absolutely not. Are there developments on it? Absolutely not. But you get an FTR match most weeks, and you get Nigel and Tony. So that's about all I need, really. It's fun.
I was with you on the FTR match this week. The youngest men alive did themselves proud. Don't know what everyone was hating on. Like to see them in that spot.
People were very mad. People thought that match was terrible. I was kind of dreading it as a fan of FTR. I saw some reviews and I was like, oh my god, this match sucked. I had fun with it. I think without doing a long segment on the Outrunners versus FTR, folks, I'm not that much of a cliche, but I think that match was a good example of how you can actually wrestle a longer match with underneath guys without entirely burying yourself. So I would recommend, folks, because FTR kept it light, right? They did some comedy stuff with the Outrunners rather than, taking brain busters and such in the 7th minute.
they are the perfect fodder wrestlers. Like that
Yeah.
that is their role.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
where they should be. They almost maybe get slightly overused, and then it's like, all right, let's keep it like, special
rein
when
it
they
in.
come out.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit. When the team were like Dalton Castle, it was like, come on, we can put them in a different role. But no, I'm a big fan of them. I doubt you did any of the highlights from Collision, JP. Your boy hologram team with Darby Allin. That was the other notable thing for me from Collision, as well as like the Brian sit down interview as well. It was a show this week.
Was that the end? That's the end of the Arlington run.
Yeah, because obviously.
Yeah,
because next week is
is
Cardiff. Yeah, that's Collision. They're
Wow,
taking Collision
leave the
to
memories
Dynamite.
alone.
I know. I should
I
move
think they should be going back on the reg.
Yeah.
I think it's a decent venue. I know there were some teething problems with sound and whatnot in the first week, but I think in terms of the crowds they got, in terms of what it created, in terms of just the cost efficiency of running that smaller venue, but had all the technological aspects that they needed as well. I think it was a really good choice, and I think it was a good. It feels like a choice from the new events guy who came in, who looked and just thought, hang on a minute, we're losing money. Why are we booking all of these massive basketball arenas when we could just be here for a period of time? And I think it's worked.
I enjoyed it as I watched it today while I was on as throwaway telly. The only negative I would say, I don't know if you want Swerve in that spot in the bit of the work to All In. I enjoyed the EC match, but it felt a little bit like he's stepping down to do Collision if it's going to be presented as it is now. But again, I enjoyed that match too. It wasn't anything on the show I didn't enjoy. That's Collision, innit? Garrett's a gigantic fan for the same reasons as you, Joe. There's no doubt on who's winning or losing most of these matches, but if you want some matches, you're getting them.
Yeah, it's just like it's in a weird way, and this is a true wrestling sickness when you find wrestling to be calming. But in a weird way, there's a rhythm to old school wrestling shows, right? Like, it's just wrestling. You don't have to think about it much.
Studio wrestling. That's what it is. And there's
exactly
a really good place for studio wrestling.
Exactly.
Yeah, definitely. And I could see it being the longer term home of ROH as well. But for talking some TV wrestling, we'll blow through the last few subjects. And the other question I've got on our very professionally put together form here is Raw good now? That's the other thing I caught you watching today, Joe. I know you've seen some highlights too, JP. Like, people, I wasn't just pissed when we did GRAPPLlads last week. We did the show in the pub, Joe, and the idea was we were not going to talk about wrestling. We were just going to have a chat about whatever comes to mind. We did a Raw review for about 40 minutes. When did we turn into a Raw review podcast, JP? That's how much I enjoyed the show last week. I thought it was a really... If WWE's going to be WWE, it's not always going to be to like our listenership tastes or my tastes, and I almost just accept things about this is how WWE is going to be presented. But as far as like if you are going to do a 3-hour TV show and with all those stipulations, I thought last week's Raw was incredible, and like this week's Raw followed it up to an extent. I didn't enjoy it quite as much, but again, it kind of flew by today watching it with work, and you can't often say that about these long shows. I know you're a big booster of 3-hour TV shows, Joe, so I know it's right up your street.
Yeah, exactly. Try and get through it in 40 minutes and call it a day. No, look, honestly, it feels a bit gross the way this conversation is going to go because, like, I'm hesitant to do it, but I think it's a good wrestling show, to be honest. I mean, I don't watch it say... the thing is, it's easy for me to say that because I do skip stuff, right? So it's easy for me to say that. But it's a very... This is the most boring way you can describe wrestling, but I believe it's accurate. It's a very efficient wrestling show. So much so, there'll be matches you'll look at on paper. For example, Damian Priest versus JD McDonough, and you'll go, no, I'm not doing it. But look, whatever I think, the people are into the conflicts, the angles, and the characters. Massive. And it's like Damian Priest is an actual like star for them. People react to Damian Priest like a superstar. And it's a thing you see across a lot of their stuff right now is the angles are over. The in-ring, I actually think the more over guys get, the looser that stuff gets, to be honest. You know, Raw's had a couple of exceptions, don't get me wrong. There's been some really good matches on Raw. But generally, like you watch the pay-per-view sometimes, the guys are like, you know, they're working like a 1987 garden show or something. You know, and God bless them. Good luck to Jey Uso. Yeah. But
Hacksaw Jey Uso, yeah, he does well.
For real, you know. But it's like, I think it is a good show. I think it's very smartly. I mean, Bronson Reed getting that reaction for doing anything is, I don't know. You can tell
it was so good last week.
It was so good, and you. What the thing with it is, it reminds you how quickly booking can make or break a guy. And it's a lesson that, to be honest, has been increasingly absent from the wrestling landscape in the States because we haven't really had booking.
No.
And it's like, oh shit, you can still make a guy by having him hit their finish 10 times on a top guy. Cool, nice to know. So I think it is a good wrestling show, even if I'm hesitant to say such things. I think it is.
Yeah, this week's show, like you say, for example, like all of the Judgment Day stuff, it's so over with that crowd. We went through it at length, JP. Like the Dominic stuff isn't for us. It's not even for Matty, which is a shocker. You know, the soap opera style wrestling, but it's so clearly for that audience. And this week, to be honest, I enjoyed the overall segment because of how over Damien and Rhea are, and because the fruits of that labor. And I do have like a guilty pleasure that just I enjoy Dominic Mysterio as like a bit of an act. That as a a mixed tag or however they want to term it for the pay-per-view is a great match to set up for the pay-per-view if you're that audience and you're invested in that story. Like I think it's a grown. I think Joe's absolutely right, JP. It's a grown-up wrestling fan thing to be like. It's not necessarily for me all the time, but I've got eyes and ears. You can see it's working. It is, and arguably, I'd say the shows have been good the last couple of weeks. On top of it,
I feel it's funny because on my notes here I've written that talking about current WWE makes me feel like when Martin Scorsese was talking about Marvel, and it was just like. However, I can appreciate how it works and how it's constructed. It's just not. It's a lot of it. It's candy for the most part, and that's fine for what it is, as long as you know what it is you're getting into. That's why I think we're harsher on AEW, is we think, well, we don't want it to be that, and it shouldn't be like that. And anytime anyone has tried to imitate it, it just comes across as a cheap knockoff. It's in the main, it's formulaic, it is kind of by the numbers, it's built around some big set pieces, but it works for a massive audience. And what I got reminded by from this, and I don't often watch Raw highlights and everything else because I can't. 3 hours, it's like I've said so many times, just too much for me personally. However, it reminded me of the Attitude Era in the sense everyone, and it's probably helped having seen like how the oddities were over in like 1997, 98, like in WWE. You look at this and everyone has a role. There's reasons for everyone being there, even down to Odyssey Jones, who I couldn't really care anything about strongly personally, but he's immediately put into a story. Even Karrion Kross, for the love of Christ. Like, there is reasons for him being there as this instigator. He's basically he's telling like, you know, Xavier Woods, this is what's going to happen to you. And you know it's going to happen. You're waiting for it to happen. And they seem absolutely fine with that. And even like Alpha Academy, Carlito, everyone has a purpose and a role. And that was the strength. The strength was how they wrote the undercard as opposed to the top guys, because the top guys do top guy things and that works. And the crowd are always going to react to that. I was just more amazed that there is a lot less like kind of fat, even the Pete Dunne stuff, like completely. I was just like, oh, right, this is what's happening with him these days. And he's like, don't call me Butch. And, you know, and the way he ends up attacking Sheamus, and Ludwig Kaiser kind of backing off as well. Not because they magically like each other now, because they're both on the heel side. It was just like, it felt, they're not like real people, but they're certainly realer than what they were. Yeah. And there's a level of organization and structure to it that is, it's kind of scary. Like they've hit like a formula and a pattern, and you go, shit, this works. Which, if you're a fan of every other promotion bar WWE, isn't always a good thing.
I mean, talking the top stuff on this show, I absolutely agree. You know, structurally, you know, we can look at it as spreadsheet wrestling, but I do think there was quality there this week. I thought the Gunther and Orton segment was really well done. I thought the Sammy and Bron Breakker match was, you know, I like that kind of the mid card IT title. Work a kind of division in theory, but maybe to your point before, Joe, sometimes it flatters to deceive. I'll tune in going, okay, this combination of guys is clearly going to be great, and it is as always. But it could be WWE's answer to, we're not the work rate company, but we will throw you this match, you know, in this 3-hour show, and it was one of the better matches of the week, you know, as a 2 out of 3 4 match. And you add that, it's like how hot the Judgment Day angle was. You add that 12, even just like, again, seeing these characters interact with each other. Drew coming out during like the Gunther and the Orton moment, and that leading into Punk was a nice way of turning the normal structure of things where everyone's in their own siloed universes that we see so often at AEW, turning that on its head, even that I really enjoyed this week. There was
that was a huge. I always remember because a lot of the WWE TV tropes I hate, like the thing where guys bump into each other backstage. Is like, I hate it. But I had a moment where I had to accept that its value when Punk did that. I think it was like a tribute to the Troops TV after he came back. And he did this deal where like he walked backstage and like every main character interacted with CM. And they do the thing where they stand and the place pops and they, and I'm watching it and I'm kind of going, I resent this. But it's good TV, if I'm being honest with myself. Here you're basically saying to the audience, imagine this match. Imagine this match, right? And it's like, I don't know. There are certain what I've learned from the Triple H era. I'm not going to say Paul Levesque era. That feels even more pretentious. I'll say Triple H era. While a lot of it is not for me, it is an example of how their tropes were not as broken as I thought. The guy calling the plays was more broken than even I realized. I think that's what. Because let's be honest, it's not like Triple H is producing a version of WWE we've never seen before. It's more that he's using their playbook, but he's actually using the thing.
Tearing the pages out 3 weeks later and
exactly. What's really interesting is if you guys remember when he first got the book, he was doing those he would have like 20-minute matches on Raw to fill up the time, and people were just sitting there watching these matches. And slowly he's found more success actually just doing WWE well. Because we haven't seen WWE done well, whatever that means to you, in 20 years maybe. I don't know. It's a fascinating dynamic, and all of that stuff adds up. A whole bunch of factors here.
And I never because I know it offends some of those guys like you who are in our chats and are on our podcast sometimes, JP. You don't want to talk about them like they're an alien race, these Fed fans. But speak to a Fed fan, they're so happy right now. They are so happy right now. They are so super saved. They are loving these big moments happen every week. They're excited about what's to come. They're excited about they got two fucking gigantic baby faces at the same time. All easy stuff that could have been done for the last 20 years. But like you said, Joe, that's another conversation. You can't avoid it. There's reasons the business is up. It's not disconnected. I think that happens in our discourse a lot. It's they just like big pops. No, the big pops are happening because they like it. All these things are connected, It's
They pay off the angles. Look, do I care about the Finn thing? Not really. If you care, you got it though, right? You got the payoff. It matters, man.
It's amazing what fan service will do.
Yeah.
What happens if you actually decide we're not going to actively punish the fan base?
Paying attention.
What happened for 20 years? 20 years.
And we're all still fucking here somehow. How do we all not find better hobbies, we had alternatives. But I was going to say on that note, unless there's anything more on Raw, very quickly, Smackdown this week, again, so you're suffering through that one, mate. But obviously that Roman Reigns angle at the end, it was pretty much just a repeat of the pay-per-view. But I like the direction they're going in. Obviously, it's being reported that Jacob Fatu is actually going to be back at the end of this month, which is fantastic news. Better news than that, they are purposely making him and Roman avoid each other because they want to let Roman beat up the scrubs first, and Jacob they're holding back. It seems like, and that's going to be the bigger match they get to after whatever happens with Solo and such, which was music to my ears. And again, things done right, I would say, even if 3/4 of that SmackDown this week wasn't again, not necessarily for me.
Yeah, SmackDown needs some. It needs some beyond Andrade, it needs some good wrestlers. To be honest with you, it's especially when AJ's not around. Dude. When AJ's not around, it's like fuck. There's not a lot there. I did not like the show, but Roman Reigns came across as an absolute transcendent star.
Unreal.
Which is that getting people to chant OTC is
it's so shit, isn't it?
It's like winning 9-0 in a cup final. You should just resign the next day. It's only down from here. There, in a lot of ways, that's part of riding the wave, right? You just you can train your audience. But the angle was great, and it's broad strokes. A lot of the audience, I'm really intrigued how Netflix is going to impact this because I'm not an expert on TV viewership. You cannot convince me a lot of that audience isn't following along online. There's no way that this Liv and Rhea thing is crossed over. And I don't think it's from people channel hopping. I think it's from stuff like TikTok, Instagram, all of this, have YouTube, so on and so forth. Fascinated how that trends when they go on Netflix, right? It'd be interesting.
I was talking to someone at the weekend at Rev Pro about that, and it was kind of like, to me, it seems obvious. Netflix is the new terrestrial telly. Like, they're going to be shop window right in the middle, and that's how you make fans. Although the person I was talking to was like, right, but you're forgetting Raw is still 3 hours, you know? But I was like, I think the counter to that is Netflix might find another way to package it. It might not necessarily be 3 hours when it goes to Netflix, but it's TikTok. It's shorter form stuff. That's probably how you're going to pull in those new fans. That's how how many years have we talk? We talk about WWE being bad for 20 years, and the biggest sin was like, it was just those people like us still watching. Because why would you be a new fan of this? Why would you get this new hobby that has you? Especially if you're British. 1 a.m. every Monday night, you can stay for 3 hours and watch something that's terrible. Like it wasn't happening, was it? Whereas it feels like there's a path there to make those new fans, but it probably come in a way that maybe we're not thinking of. But I think that Netflix, as much as it's talked up as being the big thing for WWE next year, I think it's almost underplayed too.
Yeah,
I think it is. I think the cultural impact it's going to have, because it's going to be all over the place. Because we just forget about the idea that really TV is, for the most part, a dying medium. We look at
TN Sports as like, they're on TNT. Oh, that's a big deal. It's prestigious. People pay for it. Not a lot of people are watching it at the end of the day, are they? And that's the difference.
No, for sure. I think Netflix, it would not surprise me if the 1-2 punch from a sort of marketing point of view, it feels like Rhea is going to be the lead in that regard. I think Rhea will be all over everything WWE Netflix will be Rhea, because people recognize her as like, oh, Rhea from TikTok, which is
absolutely hilarious,
but it's a real thing. And then
the amount of YouTube videos I watch, Joe, where I'm like, I watch all kinds like travel YouTube or different stuff, comedy or whatever. The amount of comments you see on YouTube videos now, it's like this comment, if you hear from TikTok, like it's the path that people discover these content creators and such, you know?
It's wild. And I think with Punk on Raw, presuming he's going to be, and hopefully he's healthy and still is like rolling by that point, I mean, he's huge for the fan that is lapsed, right? That's kind of seen some stuff. Oh, I know Punk came back. There's a lot there. I think there is still things that internally they should strive to make better, so that it is more appealing to the fan that watches for the first time in years, because there's still stuff that we as wrestling fans accept as part of the recipe that is not very good, really, right? That we kind of go, that's what they do. So there's some stuff there. But
friendship bracelets could be a new one. Punk threw that away, didn't he, on Raw? It was just like, not even asked about that. he's definitely on. He's seen the tweets. He's heard the podcasts.
I'm so intrigued by how they develop this thing now, that with respect, now that Seth's out of the way and I can just enjoy myself. I can't wait to see
match
what
apparently we're getting at Bash in Berlin, which I wasn't expecting. I thought they'd just go straight to Hell.
I wasn't either. And that Berlin show is, I mean, I've done this before where I've looked at WWE shows and said it would be great, and it's turned out less great than hope. But that show looks really intriguing. It looks strong. There's 3 really big matches there for that, and you assume it'll be a 5-match card, so it'll be like a kind of takeover vibe. The matches they're putting together.
Yeah. And for us, Saturday night, perfect time. Prime time. I'm looking forward to it. Like, get a sneaky Sunday spotlight with that one. Let's see. Things land. If that's WWE, quickly, are we still watching the G1? That's the other note I've got here. How are we getting on with the watching, lads? I did see a couple of the recommended matches this week. One of them had Oleg Bolton in it, so I mean that probably tells you where I am with my G1 watch. But I did do a bit of catch up.
I did a bit of catch up as well, and I have to say, this feels like it's this G1. I wonder how it's going to be viewed in a few years' time. Was this the building blocks of what they were going to be doing next? Because there's a lot of that, and it's not to be overstated the fact that Tetsuya Naito has not made out of the blocks. Like, I was like, oh, thank God, that's a good thing. And I caught up on some of the matches, and like I mean, I won't go into detail on them as well, but like I heard a lot of talk about ELP and Konosuke Takeshita. I thought that was cracking, and it was coincidence of the matches I caught up on today. I watched 3 Takeshita matches: him against Goto, him against ELP, him against Oleg Boltin. And you know what? I enjoyed all of them, and I was just like, Jesus, get this guy if you can. even the commentators made reference to, like,
Yes.
well,
You did a great job, Joe.
like,
Good job today, mate.
Yeah, cheers, mate.
Great on the call.
I thought you'd be knackered as well, going back to Romford as well.
I saw that podcast you
Fair
did
play.
together. It was like, oh, actually, we don't look alike. When you did finally meet.
Dude, in all seriousness, it's pretty good that he's as good at his job as he is, because it'd be very unfortunate for that to be polite, but he's like a prodigy. Seriously, good lord.
For how young he is, like, yeah.
He has completely found it, and the fact that he has to work with different, like, what was interesting was hearing the different commentators and the nights where Charlton was there. He was there for the Kurikan shows, but it was Gabriel Kidd for one of them, sounding like he just finished binge watching on Netflix Supercell and Top Boy again, and just decided, yeah, this is me. Going to start talking about food next there.
It's a great show,
round, won't he? But they're both cracking shows, particularly Supercell, which I think is slightly underrated. But you had Callum Newman doing commentary for one of the nights, which I just thought was really nice. And he was able, and obviously like the likes of an ELP and Hanare, who was good on commentary as well. And he was able to interact with all of them. And it's not, think about like the grind for him having to do it. Having heard Kevin Kelly go through the motions on this stuff, which admittedly had some bleak G1s to cover in the last couple, but Walker Stewart he's like he's finding himself. He's not the finished article yet, but neither should he be at his age. But I think it's like, what I've found is, while there isn't, like, I've not gone above 4.25 for any of the matches, which I did for ELP and Takeshita and Zack Sabre Jr., Gabriel Kidd, which I loved, which I thought was like a cracking match as well. Yeah. I've just been so impressed, to the point I can't even talk. I've been so impressed with actually going, okay, they are making some positive steps in their booking, and, you know, seeing Evil miss out, not putting Naito into the quarterfinals. I mean, that A block was a pretty barren place, but the B block is a hell of a lot of fun. Really unpredictable. I mean, there's various other scenarios they can go into in the last day. I'm expecting it to be Takeshita, David Finlay, and Yota Tsuji to be the three that go through. But you're thinking to yourself, like, this is like that's good. That at least is different. And I think for New Japan, for where it has been and the staleness of the product, of how it's been, this is a direction they had to go in. I'm just glad they did it, and that horrible, like, rampant conservatism that sort of permeates all New Japan booking has slightly gone, and they've just gone, no, we're going to have to take some risks. And it's like, good, because you won't know otherwise unless you actually do it. So some of the matches I've seen this week I've really enjoyed.
What have you made of it, Joe? What's your engagement level been?
Almost zero until today, and then I had some spare time, and I thought, I'm going to pick out a trilogy. I'm going to scroll Cage Match. The problem I have is a lot of the fellas in New Japan are on a list of, like, you know, I don't need to watch them wrestle in G1, because I've either seen what they can do. I broke that for one match. I'll get into in a second. But the matches I watched the Takeshita Bolton match, which was tremendous. And the right length for it too, right? They just whacked each other for 10 or 12 minutes, got out there. It was a really good time. Takeshita's obviously spectacular.
Great finish as well, putting him over. Like, I wasn't expecting that at all. Yeah. For
sure. I saw Hanare and Yuya, because I wanted to see you, because my friend Ibu, who we've brought up a couple of times on this show, little known fella on Twitter, he's a big fan, which generally means I don't like to be a fan. But in this case, I saw a lot of criticism that Yuya does like arm drags and is an old school wrestler, so I just decided I'm a fan. Went with it. I liked the match he had with Hanare. I thought it was a good match. Not a great match, but a good match. And then the one that I gambled on, because I would usually, one of these gentlemen will be on that list I was just talking about, David Finlay, Hiroki Goto. Yeah. And I looked at it, I looked at the rating, and I thought, let me think about this, let me mull this out. And then I saw Korakuen Hall. And I thought, maybe, just maybe. And I must say, it was actually my favorite of the matches I watched, believe it or not. Hiroki Goto is one of those wrestlers that you actually appreciate more once you've had some distance from him. You haven't watched him wrestle every day for the last year, and you go, he's still tremendous. And they had a really good, and Goto kind of got he like won the people's hearts over in the midst of the match. They got with it. It felt like a really big deal. I really enjoyed that. So that was my trilogy for today. I may pick out a couple more tomorrow. But I had fun with it, for sure.
We moaned about Goto for years, and those G1s,
Exactly.
and now look back, how spoiled we were. Oh,
Yeah.
Goto's in it. Like, he's like top 3 now, isn't he? Like, top 2.
Yeah.
Like,
and it's easy to forget. There was always the point that he always delivered on the big stage. When it came
Yep.
to the big Wrestle Kingdoms in their pomp, he was there with that G1 final against Kenny Omega. Is Kenny Omega where he is? If you know, in terms of that match, that really helped Kenny Omega as well. And he's filled that role of he is like the veteran in that block, but he can still go, as opposed to the other block where they just like you look at Naito, for example, he looks fucked.
Yeah.
So I'm always going to go back onto that as well. But that's
a story to tell, JP. He's fucked, you know.
He is. I don't think you need to tell that story. That seems to be just the reality of the situation.
Like Jericho, in it, he's bad. No, you're supposed to think he's bad. That's the thing. Fuck off, Leah. Fuck off.
What is this, Chris Park? For God's sakes, like you know, where he's a wrestler trying to pretend to be a bad wrestler who can't wrestle at all. Like no, but that's you know, at least we're getting a bit of difference. I know next week we'll talk a lot more about it because we'll have had the finals.
We'll do the full
everything else by that stage. So
I will say I was more positive on the booking earlier on. It has kind of fell into like, oh, okay, we're not pushing that guy now with a few guys in it, even if there's been a few like good surprise results over the last couple of days. I want to see what Gabe Kidd feels like, someone who's gotten over through this G1. You know, again, I've said it before, he just throws shit at a wall, and half of it I might not like, but I respect that he's throwing shit at a wall, and something is clearly landing for him. But yeah, my highlights briefly have been exactly the same as that, really. Nothing involving Jake Lee, but mostly involving the names that we've mentioned there, and Takeshita's top of that list. Goto, surprisingly as well, and like I say, I had a lot of fun with the Oleg Bolt and Takeshita match as well.
Yes.
So, yeah, it's not been a total loss this year, the G1. But yeah, unless there's anything else you guys want to mention on that, dead quickly, we had an update on the Janel Grant case. Apparently, she's her side filed a motion to strike Dr. Carl and Coker's bill of discovery. They're now seeking treble damages. I don't know if you want to translate it for us, JP. As you said on the weekend show, the back and forth continues. But yeah, interesting. Obviously, there've been comments from the Vince McMahon side calling it a smear campaign, and obviously denouncing Grant and saying it's nefarious tactics that she's gone after the wellness clinic, who have now been outed as very much the mystery medical place that was mentioned in the suit against Vince and WWE. But did we learn anything new, JP? Briefly, I'm not sure we did.
I don't think we did, other than Janelle Grant's playing hardball, going back for the triple damages, and I don't think in the court of public opinion, Vince, the billionaire Vince McMahon, coming back and making out he's the result of a smear campaign from Janelle Grant, who is very much not a billionaire, is the way for him to go. Like, I just think this is the kind of thing which just ties stuff up in litigation. So that's where that is.
I know, yeah, we'll cover that in more detail as we know more. That's just breaking this evening. And the other story that broke today, very last thing, Noah announcing that Yoshinari Ogawa is retiring from in-ring action. The last link to the past there, saw James describe him as today, JP. Any big memories you wanted to say on that one?
I don't really
thought he was old, to be honest.
That's it. And he's like 40 years as a wrestler. He always looked like a junior heavyweight, even though he did win the GHC heavyweight once. He was a Misawa trainee, so that's always why he ended up getting the push as well. I think it seems like it's a very Ogawa thing to do, just like I'm stepping away, neck injury. And he's done everything he can do in wrestling. When I would see him in the last sort of Noah shows that I saw him on, he was part of a stable that he would occasionally be teaming with Chris Ridgway. Then they turn on them, and then they'd have matches against them, and then they go back together again, and that'd be how it is. But like you say, he is one of those last links to All Japan. I know Marufuji had a match in All Japan, I think Mark Buckledy was saying, and there was like Segura trained there as well. But he's very much the last proper link to All Japan. So like, good luck to him, and good luck to him for recognizing that this is the time to retire. If it's your neck, don't mess about with it. And he's done as much as he's ever going to do in wrestling. So good luck to him.
Definitely. Well, there we go. Unless there's anything else on that, or otherwise, that brings us to the end of a cracking spotlight, Joe. Again, bucket list stuff having you on, mate. Made up to have you as a guest. Glad we finally put it together, as Ben said in the chat there. And apologies to our YouTube members. We had a couple of issues with the link earlier, so sorry about that. But good to see Ben in the chat. Saying Joey Bing Bong on spotlight. What a time to be alive. We put it together, mate. We did it finally after flirting for so many years in the DMs.
Right, yeah, it does feel overdue. I'm thrilled to have done this. It delivered. Again, a few times I did sort of trend into just listening and watching the program, but I was here for most of it and chipped in a little bit along the way. But no,
you were brilliant, mate.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It was a great time, and I said at the top of the show, and I'm more than happy to close with it. Sincerely, when something happens in wrestling, if I want to hear people talk about it, you guys will be like among the first people I'll go to. There's very, very few people I actively want to listen to talk about wrestling because I do so much of it. Like you two are both in the top of that list. Great. I love the show. So it's a pleasure to be on. It was great.
Cheers, mate. Really appreciate it. Brilliant to have you on. You've been a phenomenal guest, mate, as well. So
that's it.
Have you on again soon?
Yeah, definitely in the feelings, massively mutual. Always love watching your stuff. Do you want to tell people where they can find it in the many places and the many YouTube channels, mate?
It'll probably change by the time this drops, right?
Contract season, mate.
Yeah, something like that. Late Night Grin is the main thing right now. So at Joe Hulbert on the Twitter gimmick, and you'll see postings about all sorts of shit, photos of sideways and things of that nature. But that's on Twitter. Late Night Grin also on Twitter, but on YouTube too. We've got some big stuff coming up. I've hinted at it, so I feel like I can say, hey, this is Grapple. You guys deserve a little mini announcement to close the show. The 20th of this month, the 20th will be 3 years, unless I'm mistaken, since the first dance, I'm pretty sure, which was the pilot unofficially for the Late Night Grin. The following week, we started with LNG 1. With that in mind, on the 20th, there'll be a very substantial announcement for anyone who cares about the Late Night Grin. And what we're doing moving forward. We've got some big stuff coming up that has come as a result of no one else wanting to use me. So much like Jeff Jarrett in 2002, I can't work Japan. Vince won't have me. I must simply build my own thing to be the world's champion of. So Late Night Grin, August 20th, there'll be a big announcement regarding that. But thanks for having me, fellas. This was fun.
Man of our own heart.
Thank you, mate.
A great follow, and definitely watch Joe's stuff if you don't already. But yeah, that's it for us for another Spotlight. Cracking show. Thank you to our live patrons who stayed with us and our YouTube members who may have joined late again. Apologies, that's my fault. But thank you to Carl Laughlin, Eddie Sideburns, Chris Platt, Ewan Cameron, and Carl Gack as Kings of the Mountain. Listen to Carl's show on ICP we did this week. Listen to GRAPPLlads, and we'll have the Best in Brit-Res. That's a different thing. Podcast coming for the end of the month as well. And of course, all roads lead to All In weekends where we will be live for our live show. Professional podcasters, as you've seen today, doing a professional podcast live. Come see us Saturday, 24th of August, before the Copper Box. We'll be around all day and even as well. But yeah, check all that out. Listen to all our stuff. Watch all our stuff. Watch Joe's stuff as well. We will catch you again at some point this week, I'd imagine. Oh, FPL draft on Thursday as well. Tune in there. Good night, all.
Bye.
Cheers.